Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
The Storm Pirates by Drinor. What if Luffy never ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi? Instead, he devours the Arashi Arashi no Mi, the Storm fruit, gaining the power of tempests, lightning, and wind itself. With the power of the storm in his hands, Monkey D. Luffy will turn the world upside down and forge a new legend as the captain of the Storm Pirates. Big shout out to the warlords of this channel: Throat Punch, Rodarius Jones, Native Warrior, Claude Lefrace, Neo-Esker 23, Derek Dowdy, Zazu Syaz, Abdul Rauf Ali, N3WT, What If Lord, Black Money Young Leon, Garrick Russell, Case Clark, KSGPL4YZ, and Brian McKenzie. You know who you are. Want to stand among the warlords? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios.
So you want to kill Enel? Luffy questioned. The man had revealed himself as Wiper before telling them that he was the leader of the Shandai Warriors, a group that was against God Enel. While his story sounded interesting and all to Luffy, the Monkey Brothers were the ones who were paying attention the most to the story that Whipple was telling them. "Wait, can I ask you something?" Cricket asked with a somewhat shaky voice. His Monkey Brothers looked at him with concern. The Shandai looked at the three of them with clear distrust but nodded nonetheless. "Yay, I guess. Have you heard of Noland?" Upon hearing the name, Wiper's face turned white for a moment. From his face, everyone immediately knew that Wiper was familiar with the name. "So the people from the Blue Sea still remember him," Wiper said with a somewhat small smile, but the crew knew his name wasn't really remembered for good. The world thought of him as a liar, as someone who lied even moments before his death. The world doesn't remember him for good. Everyone spits on his name. Noland is remembered as Noland, the liar, Cricket explained. Upon hearing that, Wiper's face turned red with anger and rage, his blood boiling in rage after hearing how Cricket insulted Noland. Wiper's voice rang out, cutting through the air. "What? He was no liar," he exclaimed, his words laced with a mixture of astonishment and indignation. This conviction fueled his anger and rage, causing his emotions to surge within him. Wiper's hands instinctively tightened around the handle of his sturdy spear, his grip growing firm. However, just as he was about to make his move, an unexpected force halted him in his tracks, rendering him motionless. The force that held him back came from Luffy, who was using Conqueror's Haki. The sheer intensity of this powerful ability washed over Wiper like a wave, enveloping him in its paralyzing grip. Wiper started sweating heavily. The air itself felt heavy and hard to breathe in, barely keeping his concussion as Luffy gave him a cold glare. But one thing was new about Luffy's Haki. Robin quickly noticed that this time, the entire blast was concentrated on Wiper instead of being spread around. Usually whenever Luffy used his Conqueror's Haki, even if his target was one single person, those near Luffy would still feel it, but to a much lesser extent. Robin couldn't feel anything this time, letting everyone know that Luffy was better at controlling his Haki now. And Robin could swear she could see a red outline in Luffy's Haki. She was sure it hadn't been there before. As the wind grew increasingly harsh and faster, in the distance, a solitary tree stood. Suddenly, the relentless wind exerted its power, resulting in the abrupt severing of the tree's trunk at its very core. The crew observed as the tree toppled with a mighty crash, landing on the sand below. Surprisingly, despite its immense size, the wind effortlessly swept the fallen tree away as if it weighed nothing more than a feather. Time seemed to freeze as Luffy ceased using his Conqueror's Haki. The wind vanished immediately. The tree fell down. Wiper breathed heavily. His entire face had gone pale. He looked at Luffy and for the first time, he showed genuine fear. For a moment, he expected Luffy to attack him, but he did none of that. "We are having a simple discussion. Try that again, and you will find yourself on the bottom of the Blue Sea." Luffy's threat made Wiper shudder. He knew the pirate wasn't making an empty threat, so he took a deep breath to calm himself before looking startled at Cricket. "What do you know of Noland?" Cricket asked excitedly. Wiper remembered the tales he was told when he had been young. "Spearfishing? Why not use nets? Or fishing poles? We can show you how." Calgara was leading Norland to the water. He didn't turn to answer but lifted his head high and proud. We've done it this way in Shandia for hundreds of years. It's all we need. Then Calgara looked over his shoulder and added, and sometimes science is less fun. Norland caught the smile and laughed, following Calgara good-naturedly across the beach until Caligara selected a likely spot. Norland shed his greatcoat and shirt and bent to take off his boots and roll up his pants, tucking his sash in so it wouldn't trail in the water. He hefted the spear, looking uncertain. "You're sure about this?" Smiling a little at his own hesitation, not quite laughing. Calgara did laugh, dismissing the question with a decisive, "Come on." He splashed into the water and turned to wait, all challenge and laughter and wind-blown mane. Norland followed, wading in to stand beside the other man, peering into the water made murky by the sand he'd kicked up. He looked expectantly at Calgara. "Get ready and stand still." Obediently, Norland cocked the spear back, settling into a wide stance as Calgara watched. "Like this," said firm and reassuring, and he felt the smile curl against his cheek. He felt the sand start to settle around his bare feet. He looked around, searching for fish. "Should I wait and aim lower? The water bends the light, so?" "Hush and feel the water. You'll know when to strike." He laughed softly, and Calgara nudged him to quiet him. "You'll scare the fish." The water was clear, sparkling, and bright under the high sun. He could see the fish now, shimmering and shy. "Don't move," Calgara whispered unnecessarily. The water rushed slowly around them. When something moved at the edge of his vision, startling him back into awareness, Norland was surprised to discover that he had cramp from the weight. A fish had swum close, curious. He missed, of course. Calgara sniggered. Norland splashed him and turned to go after the spear. A great sheet of water barreled into his back, and he crashed face first into the sea. He came up sputtering as Calgara clutched at his belly, laughing. Norland swept at Calgara's knees with the spear, and the other man collapsed in a great confusion of hair and splashing water and limbs. It wasn't long until the beach was raucous with laughter and the splash of water, all the fish long since terrified away. Wiper told them of their tales, as much as he remembered from what he had heard when he had been young. Once he was done telling them everything, he asked Cricket, "Do you have any kind of connection with Noland?" "I'm a descendant of him." Upon hearing those words, Wiper gasped in shock. He looked at him from up close. He could see a few similarities between the two. He had seen how Noland had looked like in an old portrait made at the time before he quickly bowed his head in shame. He wanted to slap himself for being such a big fool. "I'm really sorry for trying to attack you." Wiper felt ashamed of himself for trying to attack a descendant of Noland, which was a great crime and an insult to the memory of both Noland and Calgar. "Hey, no need for that. Just tell me everything you know, and we are square," Cricket said with a cheerful voice and a laugh that made him look very similar to Noland's portrait. Wiper nodded without a moment of hesitation. He could almost see Noland's ghost standing behind Cricket. Wiper cleared his throat and told them everything he could. Upon hearing everything, Cricket went silent, his face as pale as snow. Luffy looked at him in silence. Suddenly, Cricket's eyes filled with tears. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and his two monkey brothers quickly were beside him. "I knew it," Cricket murmured under his breath, his voice shaking, before looking up at Luffy. I need to see that bell with my own eyes." "Why?" "I will ring it. I will let everyone know, even in the blue sea, that Noland that he was no liar." Cricket shouted to the skies above. The crew smiled at him while Wiper nodded in agreement. Luffy was the first to stand up, dusting off his clothes. "Well, we were going to defeat Enel anyway. My crew, we are going to the upper yard," Luffy ordered. Everyone prepared. They were expecting to get into the ship and sail towards the upper yard. But Luffy wasn't in the mood to waste their time. "What? We are not using Going Merry," Luffy suddenly announced, much to everyone's confusion. Even Zoro wondered what Luffy was talking about. If they weren't using the ship, how were they supposed to go there? And they didn't know how to perform Geppo. "What do you mean? Are we supposed just to fly there?" Usopp questioned in confusion, with a chuckle of amusement. But when Luffy's eyes remained stoic and serious, Usopp's smile vanished. "Wait, for real? How?" Usopp couldn't help but shout loudly. Luffy didn't answer him. Instead, he looked to his right to see Konis approaching them. Luffy noticed the way she kept shaking as she somehow mustered a smile on her face. You should all leave before the god judges you. If you leave right now, you can perhaps escape his judgment, Konis shouted with what sounded like a desperate voice. She's right, Usopp remarks. Say, is there a way for us to go back safely? He asks them. Can we go back to the Blue Sea? There is a way, though, at this point, I can no longer say it's safe. Konis confesses. If you go to Cloud End, the farthest edge of the clouds. Cloud End? How do we get there? He asks her. Cloud End is in the far east. To get there, you must go down to the White Sea first. She explained, but Luffy could tell she was lying through her teeth. Good. The sniper cheers. Then we can go back down to our sea from there, right? No. Luffy declines. I'm not going back. Hey, do you want to stay here and get sentenced to death? Usopp questions him. In any case, if we stay here, it'll cause trouble for Konis and her dad. Chopper reminded them, pointing his finger at him. Oh, it's no trouble. Konis assures him. But Luffy was done with the bullshit. As he turned to face his ship, his eyes focused on something underneath the ship. You know, next time, you shouldn't shake so much when you are lying. Luffy, his face contorted with an overwhelming surge of anger and fury, uttered the words with such intensity that it sent chills down everyone's spines. Konis couldn't help but gasp in alarm, her previously calm and composed demeanor shattering like fragile glass. Her widening eyes mirrored the disbelief and fear that gripped her very being while her complexion drained of color, leaving her trembling with trepidation. She instinctively recoiled, taking several hurried steps backward in a desperate attempt to put some distance between herself and Luffy's fury. However, her retreat was cut short as her feet gave way, causing her to stumble and lose balance, eventually swooping to the sand beneath her. Luffy slowly raised his left hand, and a minuscule yet ferocious tornado began to form, spinning violently in a hypnotic display of elemental might. Suddenly, everyone heard a blood-curdling scream of pain echoing through the air, causing an immediate sense of dread to wash over them. They turned in unison towards the source, their eyes widening in utter disbelief. Emerging from the clouds, a colossal, hulking crab gradually came into view, easily surpassing their beloved ship, at least 10 times bigger. Usopp, overcome by sheer terror, involuntarily unleashed a piercing scream. What is that? Chopper shouted, completely taken aback by the size of it, as it slowly floated, now standing several meters above them. That's the Super Express Speedy Shrimps. If you had tried to sail with the ship, you would have gone to the upper yard to be executed by Enel. Wiper informed all of them before glaring at the girl, who was shaking from fear. I knew we couldn't trust your kind. You will not touch her. Luffy stopped him mid-sentence. This made Wiper gasp as Luffy sent a bolt of colossal lightning that quickly killed the giant crab. The blood showered the sand, turning red. Luffy brought down his left hand, and the crab stopped floating, falling down, her massive body slamming against the beach, the sand blown out, flying everywhere, before falling back down. We were the ones that came to her home, and we caused problems. We will deal with this so-called god. Konis and her people are not part of this. Luffy spoke with a commanding voice that made it clear that he wouldn't change his mind, and Wiper better follow his orders. I am sorry. Konis suddenly apologized as tears rolled down her face. Konis is on the verge of tears and falls to her knees, failing to keep her tears at bay. I'm sorry, she cries. For what? Vivi questions gently, almost wanting to run to her. I was the one who called the Super Express lobster, Konis reveals, shocking almost everyone. Luffy's appeared blank, but Robin, Nami, and Zoro could tell right away that he was pissed. Once we know someone's a criminal, we'll be killed if we don't lead them to the place of judgment. The blonde girl cries out, and Vivi sees the dark clouds appearing above them. Are you serious? Usopp gasps. I'm sorry, she cried out. Don't be stupid. Vivi argues. You didn't have any choice, right? She looks at her darkly. Why are you telling us? The pirates shouted, surprising Konis, who stopped crying, and Vivi rushed to her, kneeling before her. Your life is in danger. Luffy watched as a bolt of lightning was about to strike both Vivi and Konis. The lightning bolt was enormous, strong enough to wipe out an entire village, but Luffy wasn't afraid as he whispered a name. Nami. The bolt of lightning was stopped abruptly just a meter above Vivi. Both girls gasped when Nami blocked the attack with her zone form. Nami's swan. Sanji drooled at the sight of Nami completely handling the bolt of lightning. As the last rays of light vanished, Nami emerged unscathed from the fading glow. With her majestic wings gracefully outstretched, it was a mesmerizing sight. The incandescent purple flames, flickering in a hypnotic rhythm, cloaked her exquisite form, illuminating her every contour and enhancing the enchanting aura that surrounded her. But Luffy quickly noticed something new, something that might make Nami even stronger now. Usually, whenever she used her form, Nami's eyes turned golden, but now they appeared a dark red, and she had tiny golden scales adorning her smooth cheeks. The rest of her body was embellished with a magnificent suit of body armor crafted meticulously from golden scales, evoking the resemblance of a majestic dragon's skin. Her back displayed an impressive pair of wings coated in the same radiant gold, stretching gracefully and enveloping her figure like a shield. These wings are far grander than Going Merry itself. Her legs resembled those of a mythical phoenix, sculpted intricately from shimmering gold. Once Nami gracefully descended onto the warm sandy beach, her mythical zone transformation gradually faded away. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she playfully winked at Luffy, beckoning him closer. Luffy couldn't resist planting a gentle kiss on Nami's lips. As the passionate moment unfolded, Sanji erupted into a fit of fury, pounding the ground beneath him with each forceful stomp. "You're always so magnificent, Nami," Luffy said with a genuine smile as he cupped her cheek with his left hand, and for the first time since their loss from Akainu, his smile was truly genuine. Nami's heart swelled in an overwhelming rush of pure, unadulterated joy at the sight before her. She found herself unable to resist the irresistible desire to press her soft, eager lips against his, savoring the taste. As her hands moved with instinctive urgency, she gently guided his hand towards her sumptuous, alluring breasts, knowing all too well the delights he found in exploring their enticing curves. At that moment, Luffy and Nami shared a passionate kiss. Luffy's touch grew tender as his hand instinctively cupped her voluptuous breast, which spilled over his palm, eliciting an involuntary moan of pleasure from Nami. Pulling back from the kiss, whispering, "I love you," with his arm wrapped securely around her slender waist, he pulled her even closer. While Luffy wouldn't mind spending more time with Nami, he knew they needed to deal with Enel first. Me, except you, Canis." The others looked at one another in confusion before approaching Luffy and Nami. "What are we doing, Captain?" Zoro questioned, but they suddenly felt a subtle tremor coursing through the ground beneath their feet, causing a slight shake. To their astonishment, they found themselves effortlessly lifted off the ground, defying gravity's hold. They were floating, each of them suspended in midair. Among the group, Usopp's fear manifested itself into a series of frantic movements. With desperation and determination, he instinctively began flailing his arms, mimicking the swimming motions. "No worries, this is simply easier. We will continue our road like this," Luffy told everyone as they were now floating 20 meters above the ground. As Robin gazed in awe, she couldn't help but express her astonishment, exclaiming, "Oh, wow. This is amazing." She was drawn to her beloved captain and gently placed her arms around him from behind, ensuring her chest was lightly pressed against his back. The intimate gesture invoked a playful chuckle of amusement from Luffy. "What about the ship?" Zoro couldn't help but ask, knowing the ship right now was completely alone with no one there to protect it. "No worries, I put a trap in our ship. But I highly doubt anyone will try to steal it, especially in Skypia," Luffy informed them with a smile. "Where are we going now?" Usopp asked fearfully. By now, he had stopped moving around while Chopper was having the time of his life, enjoying the feeling of flying. Luffy smirked in excitement as he answered, "Straight to our dear god, Enel." They had been flying for some time now. The crew still found it strange, the thought of floating like that in the air inside an air bubble, except for Nami, who was used to flying and had no problems. She actually found herself excited at the thought of fighting them. She didn't know who this god, Enel was, but she remembered how his attack had felt. While powerful, Nami had been able to handle an attack from him, something the Sky Girl said was unheard of. She didn't know yet if she could handle him, but a part of her wanted to get even stronger than she was right now. She knew she had grown stronger since she started her journey with her captain. She knew she was far stronger than Arlong right now. But that wasn't enough. Nami knew that was nowhere near enough. Their captain desired to become the king of the pirates, and she could still feel the burns on her stomach. She remembered how she had felt when the admiral had grabbed her throat. She had felt powerless against him, the same feeling she used to have with Arlong. She despised that feeling, the feeling of being powerless, of not being able to do anything. Nami didn't want to feel like that ever again, not with an admiral, not with a Yonko, not with anyone. She wanted to become the most powerful female pirate in the world, and the one known to be the strongest right now is Big Mom. Her beautiful orange eyes went to her captain. She knew there was something different with him, and she liked how he showed his power more and more. This forest is endless. I hope we don't get any surprise attacks. Usopp moaned in fear, much to Nami's annoyance. She wondered if he would ever stop acting like that. They were pirates, and he needed to act more tough and not just cover in fear the moment there was a small inconvenience in his way. Eventually, Cricket was the first to notice a city in the distance. "There," he shouted, pointing a finger. Luffy nodded as he held a small tornado. For the first time using his power, Luffy thought he was doing a good job. "I think we should go there a little faster," Luffy suddenly suggested with a growing grin that frightened the Monkey Brothers except Cricket, while Usopp suddenly had sweat rolling down his face. "What do you mean, EAA?" Luffy swung his left hand forward, causing the bubble of air to fly much faster, causing everyone to feel like they would break out of the bubble and fall down below as the speed only increased. Everyone was holding into each other for dear life except Nami, who had quickly sprung out her wings if she needed to fly on her own. "Please stop, Luffy!" Usopp and Chopper cried out as they held onto Zoro's legs, much to his annoyance, who tried to yank them away while the bubble of air kept flying forward. "What's that? You want to go faster?" Luffy said almost cruelly, with a hand cupping his ear, his grin growing wider. "Huh? No WAI. The air sphere rushed much faster, with Usopp and Chopper's hands slowly slipping away from Zoro's legs, both crying out for their lives. Suddenly, the air sphere stopped abruptly, causing both Chopper and Usopp to slam against Zoro's behind, much to his annoyance, as he rubbed his sore back. "What the hell?" Zoro shouted, glaring at Usopp specifically, who grinned innocently while trying to run away. However, they were still mid-air, so Usopp quickly remembered that he couldn't run anywhere without the ground underneath him. "Morons," Sanji said flatly as the air sphere descended. Cricket took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was to come. "We are right here, brother," Nasira and Shoju said from behind him, their hands on his shoulders. Cricket nodded, feeling better from their support. As they descended from the sky, their eyes beheld the haunting sight of a desolate city. It appeared that time had stood still, for it seemed that no soul had set foot in this forsaken place for countless years. Mother Nature had begun reclaiming her territory, intertwining her emerald arms with the decaying remnants of civilization. Standing tall and defiant, trees sprouted from every crack in the weathered stone floor, transforming the very foundation into a tapestry of organic growth. Ancient towers now stood as mere skeletal remains, their lofty summits long surrendered to the relentless passage of time. An air of disappointment hung heavily in everyone. There was not a single trace of gold anywhere. "Is this supposed to be the Gold City? Where is all the gold?" Nami's voice erupted with an unexpected surge of fury. Her golden wings rose as her legs morphed into eagle legs forged from pure, gleaming gold. She scanned her surroundings, her eyes alight with anticipation, searching every corner for the elusive gleam of the precious gold she had eagerly anticipated. Zoro murmured something about her being a witch. "Cricket, Robin. Is this the place?" Luffy questioned as the air around them disappeared, as did the mini tornado on top of his palm. Luffy looked at the city. The first time, he had been in an ancient city like this, but he would perhaps have enjoyed it more if it wasn't for his injured arm. "Yes, this should be it," Cricket said almost hesitantly. As he looked around, Luffy couldn't tell what he was feeling, but he knew Cricket was disappointed in the sight in front of them. They were expecting a city made of gold, but instead, they found the ruins of a city that existed long ago. "Where is all the gold then?" Nami questioned with growing fury, her eyes turning golden red with anger, and the red flames appeared around her form. "I don't know. No, it should have been here," Cricket shouted, sounding almost lost for words, his voice cracking as he walked further ahead of them. He kept looking at the city's ruins. Enel has all the gold. Wiper suddenly spoke as he walked up to Cricket before placing a hand on his shoulder with a smile. Enel? Yes. My own people told stories of the city of gold. I assure you that Noland wasn't lying or exaggerating anything. Enel, he must have taken the gold for himself, but I'm not sure why, and I think he might know where the gold bell is. Wiper said reassuringly. Cricket nodded with a look of determination on his face before patting Wiper on the back. Thank you. Well, what do we have here? They must be the bastards that killed Satori. Suddenly, in front of them appeared a small army, and in front of the army were three that stood out. From their clothes, Luffy knew they were Enel's dogs. Where is your god? We have no interest in small fries. Cricket suddenly shouted as he stood beside Wiper, whose massive cannon was ready to fire. You all will face his judgment, Blue Sea people. One of them shouted with an arrogant smile. He was a bald and muscular man of relatively average height with somewhat tanned skin. He has a pair of small wings sprouting from his back, which extend down to near his waist. He has a small mustache and beard around his mouth and wears a pair of small sunglasses over his eyes. He also wears a green sleeveless shirt, gray pants with several pockets, a long and flowing white sash around his waist similar to the one worn by his master, and dark leather boots with bandages around the soles. Is that so? So why isn't His Majesty here? He must be afraid that he sends his dogs to do his job. Luffy mocked with a smirk. This earned looks of rage from the army. Many of them quickly threw insults and pulled out their weapons, ready to fight for their god. You dare talk like that? We won't allow it, one of the three in the front shouted with rage before he charged towards Luffy, brandishing a spear engulfed in flames. However, just as the spear was on the brink of striking its target, someone stopped it dead on its track. It was Cricket, with a mischievous glint in his eye and a smirk playing on his lips. His arms had formed a cross in front of his chest. The fiery weapon reverberated against Cricket's unyielding arm, but to everyone's astonishment. How? Why are your hands like that? The priest who attacked shouted in shock. Cricket's arms had turned black, Mu's. Even Luffy cocked an eyebrow at the sight of armament hockey. He hadn't expected Cricket to be able to use that. Hockey? You can use that? Usopp shouted in complete astonishment. Even Zoro smirked at the sight of it while Sanji prepared himself to kick everyone's ass. I might be an explorer, but do not underestimate me, Cricket shouted before grabbing the flaming spear with his bare hands. Let go, the priest shouted as he desperately attempted to release his weapon from his firm grip. With relentless strength, Cricket's fingers clenched tightly around the spear, exerting an immense pressure that caused the metal to warp and distort. Suddenly, a primal roar escaped Cricket's lips, resonating with raw power and defiance, as he forcefully thrust the spear towards himself. The spear pierced through the air, driving itself beneath his shoulder and propelling the priest forward involuntarily as he stubbornly clung to the handle of the weapon. Cricket's right hand, clenched into a tightly wound fist, brimming with raw power and unleashed fury. With a swift and thunderous strike, the punch's force connected with the priest's face, resonating with a resounding boom that echoed through the air. As the priest was propelled through the air, time seemed to slow down, and the sound of snapping bones reverberated through the surroundings. Finally, the priest's body collided with an unyielding brick wall, shattering it into fragments and causing the entire town to crumble down upon him. Shira! Stand up! This isn't funny! The soldiers cried out in shock at the sight of one of their priests taking a punch like that. You bastard! Jet punch! Another priest shouted, suddenly appearing behind Cricket, but before the punch could make contact, the priest was kicked in the face by Wiper, who landed behind Cricket. I will watch your back, Wiper promised as the priest he kicked stood up, ready to fight more, while the one carrying a sword rushed towards the duo, but his swing was stopped by Zoro, who smirked at the sight of a sword user. Who the hell are you? Ohm shouted as they both pulled away from one another. Roronoa Zoro, I'm afraid you will end here, Zoro said with a smirk as Ohm growled in anger, but a giant yellow dog quickly joined him. Let's get him, holy, Ohm shouted as he and his steed rushed Zoro, who quickly used his two swords to forcefully stop the creature. Ohm quickly jumped down at Zoro, trying to slash him. Zoro jumped back, avoiding the attack, but Holy quickly rushed towards Zoro once again, but before it could reach him, Sanji appeared. Before kicking Holy in the back, the giant creature let out a cry as he smashed against a building. "Oi, stupid cook! What are you doing interrupting my fight?" Zoro shouted angrily at Sanji, who let out a puff of smoke from his mouth. "Shut up, moss head. I wanted to fight them both myself, but you just had to intervene," Sanji shouted angrily. Zoro glared at him as he looked ready to fight his crewmate instead. "You would have lost, sick cook. What did you just say? Come right here and say it to my face." Sanji stopped shouting when Holy rushed towards him with his mouth wide open, sharp teeth glittering, ready to take a giant bite out of Sanji, but as he shut his mouth tightly, he captured nothing but empty air, his eyes quickly noticing Sanji was above him. "Oi, what were you trying to do?" Sanji questioned as Holy tried to bite him over and over. Sanji easily dodged all the pitiful attacks, but he was growing tired. "I usually like dogs, but you are a bad one," Sanji said almost apologetically before kicking Holy in the back repeatedly, before ending the fight with a kick, sending him flying through the air before smashing against the many trees. Sanji let out a puff of smoke until he noticed a bright light above them. His eyes caught sight of what was coming. "Well, that can't be good. Wiper, you stand no chance against us. Fuza, come here." Shira shouted, blood dripping from the side of his face. As he spit out several broken teeth, he was joined by a giant bird that landed near him. Fuza has purple feathers on its enormous body and gigantic wings. It has red feathers around its neck. Its head is white, it has a sharpened beak, and its eyes are yellow-colored. Its tail is further purple-colored with lighter extensions to it. The claws underneath its legs are white, with sharp black nails. "A bird? Wow, I'm scared," Cricket mocked as Shira turned red angrily. He quickly mounted his bird before taking flight. Meanwhile, Wiper and Zandatsu were exchanging blows with one another until Zandatsu successfully delivered a jet punch at Wiper's stomach. He quickly coughed out blood as he fell on his knees. Zandatsu quickly rushed towards Cricket from behind, but Wiper appeared in his way, trying to take attack instead. "Die!" Zandatsu shouted as his jet gun attack was ready to make contact, but the moment it made contact with Wiper's arms, Zandatsu let out a silent scream. The world around him seemed to fade away, replaced by the searing pain that coursed through his body. It felt as though a giant hand had taken hold of his insides, squeezing his organs with an unforgiving grip. With each passing second, Genjutsu's strength waned, and he found himself collapsing to his knees, blood spilling from his nose, ears, and eyes like a macabre waterfall. What? Zandatsu gasped as he puked out blood streaming down his jawline and dripping on the stone floor. As he looked up, he was shocked to see reject dials on Wiper's arms. "How are you still standing?" he rasped as he kept coughing more blood. He knew the dials he was using were dangerous to even the person using them. "Why would a dead man need to know that?" Wiper questioned with a cold and detached tone. He held his spear steady and plunged it into the heart of the priest, causing a sudden burst of crimson blood to flow profusely from the wound. The priest drew one final breath before the light in his eyes faded away, and his chest ceased its rhythmic rise and fall. Wiper took in deep, labored breaths as the strain of using the reject dial began to take its toll on his body. However, his attention quickly shifted to the sky, and his eyes widened at the sight of the incoming attack. "Cricket, oops. Haha, you miss again." Shira laughed as he and Fuza kept making circles around Cricket, who kept his eyes solely on him. The priest and his stupid bird had started making quick attacks, but many of them weren't real ones, and the priest would change direction at the last second, trying to make him drop his guard, so when he eventually attacked, he would think he would change direction again. Cricket kept quiet, his eyes solely focused on the stupid bird. Suddenly, they started descending again, this time much faster than before. Cricket narrowed his eyes as his feet dug into the ground, expecting him to try and stab him with the spear, but this time the bird opened his mouth wide. "Burn him to ash," Ashura shouted as the bird unleashed a scorching breath of fire toward Cricket, causing him to instinctively leap away. However, the searing heat grazed his skin, leaving behind faint marks of minor burns. Despite his swift reaction, Cricket was caught off guard by the unexpected second attack. "Die!" echoed through the air as the spear tore through flesh and bones. Ashura laughed maniacally. Cricket, his face contorted in agony, tightly clenched his teeth as the searing pain surged through his body. The flaming spear had pierced his shoulder. As the spear tip emerged from the other side, a torrent of blood erupted from the wound. "It's over." Ashura mocked him as he tried to plunge the spear dipper into his shoulder. Cricket opened his eyes and locked them onto Ashura's terrified gaze. In a swift motion, he reached out and firmly grabbed Ashura's left wrist with his left hand, the strength in his grip sending shivers down Ashura's spine. He struggled against Cricket's grasp, but the tighter he fought, the tighter his grip became. With a smug grin plastered across his face, his fingers tight finally, Ashura's wrist snapped, eliciting a piercing scream of agony from his lips. Fuza rushed towards his master when the two monkey brothers punched him, sending him crashing to a nearby tower, which quickly collapsed on top of him. "You have nowhere to go," Cricket stated as his right hand turned black with armament hockey. Ashura's face turned pale as he started punching Cricket's hand, trying to desperately free himself. Cricket's punch unleashed a thunderous roar as it collided with Ashura's body, shattering his ribcage with a force that seemed to echo through the air. Akin to a flower blossoming with a burst of crimson petals, as blood and bones scattered in every direction. Ashura was sent hurtling through the air, his body suspended in a moment of weightlessness before crashing against the unyielding surface of a stone wall. The impact reverberated through the surroundings, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking and the splash of blood as his massive wound gushed forth a torrent of blood. Motionless and devoid of any sign of life, Ashura lay there, dead. "Brother, are you all right?" Cricket heard his brother approaching, and he groaned as the spear felt heavy on his body. Both of them looked at him with concern, but Cricket didn't want them to worry over a minor wound. He just needed to walk it off. "I will be all right. I just need to pull it out," Cricket said amidst the pain, but as he gripped the handle of the spear to try and pull it out, a shot of pain shot through his body like lightning, causing him to fall on his knees. The pain felt like a trail of fire on his entire body. "Don't move it." He turned to see the strange reindeer approaching them with a small handbag. "That spear is probably preventing you from bleeding out and dying. I will take care of you," Chopper reassured before walking behind him, looking at the wound from up close. Cricket sighed as he decided he couldn't contribute more in this fight. As he sat down and allowed Dr. Chopper to cure him, he suddenly looked upwards at the sight above everyone. "I hope Luffy is the one winning," he murmured under his breath. "Nijiko, you are surrounded," they all shouted, all 20 of them, and she remained silent. Nami was busy burning the other part of the army with her devil fruit. Nijiko was certain Nami was going a bit overboard, especially with the fire tornado. Usopp was busy fighting 10 men with his pistols. Despite his cowardness, his aim was unlike anything she had ever seen. As he was running, he aimed the pistol at the nearby wall before firing. The bullet bounced off the wall before hitting one of the soldiers chasing after Usopp. Robin was busy breaking the necks and backs of many soldiers with her devil fruit. Nijiko wondered just what else she could do with that devil fruit, probably something spicy. "Your heartbeats are too loud," Nijiko suddenly said with a blank expression. The soldiers around her all looked at her, confused. "I always preferred the silence," she added with a cold look in her eyes as she raised her hands. Suddenly, every soldier around her stopped moving. They felt their bodies grow colder and colder. "I can't move." Nijiko slowly closed her hands, causing their hearts to beat slower and slower. Until she closed her hands, all the soldiers surrounding her dropped dead on the ground, their hearts no longer beating. Nijiko looked up at the sky to see the most immense lightning she had ever seen striking something on top of the giant beanstalk. The lightning light engulfed the entire Sky Island, with many shielding their eyes. "Luffy, how are you still alive?" Enel shouted in shock as Luffy simply walked out of the crater created by the lightning attack. His clothes were burned in several places, and the bandages covering his right arm had burned out, revealing his badly burned arm. Luffy paid it no mind as he looked at Enel with clear disappointment. "Was that your best shot?" Enel growled in anger as Luffy formed a tornado with black lightning on his left palm. "I lost against a Kainu because of my cockiness. I thought because everyone so far was easy to defeat. I thought I was already powerful enough, and because of that, my crew paid the price of my foolishness." No more. Luffy stated as he slammed his left hand on his chest. The tornado entered his body. What are you doing? My devil fruit doesn't simply control lightning. It controls the storm itself and everything inside. Gear 2nd. Typhoon Man. How are you still alive? Enel shouted in shock as Luffy walked out of the crater created by the lightning attack. His clothes were burned in several places, and the bandages covering his right arm had burned out, revealing his badly burned arm. Luffy paid it no mind as he looked at Enel with clear disappointment. Was that your best shot? Enel growled in anger as Luffy formed a tornado with black lightning on his left palm. I lost against a Kainu because of my cockiness. I thought because everyone so far was easy to defeat. I thought I was already powerful enough, and because of that, my crew paid the price of my foolishness. No more. Luffy stated as he slammed his left hand on his chest. The tornado entered his body. What are you doing? Enel shouted, and one could hear fear sipping into his voice as the wind suddenly changed direction. Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed against him, planting his feet into the ground. He clenched hard as he tried not to be blasted off the top, but his feet slowly started being pushed back, leaving behind a trail on the ground. Enel's eyes widened as winds around the pirates started changing shape, many of them looking like snakes with red eyes and their jaws open, glaring at him. My devil fruit doesn't simply control lightning, it controls the storm itself and everything inside. Gear 2nd. Typhoon Man. Luffy shouted as Enel was blasted off from the place. He quickly used his devil fruit to return to the ground, but what he saw made his blood turn ice cold. Luffy was enveloped by winds all around him, his straw hat moving wildly as a small tornado enveloped his entire being. Enel watched as the veins around Luffy's body started being more and more apparent. Winds that looked like long snakes formed around Luffy, glaring at Enel, who flinched at the sight of them. The winds suddenly got denser. Enel quickly shielded his eyes with his arms. Suddenly, tiny cuts started forming around the ground. Enel winced in pain as his body was suddenly cut on his arms and legs. While the wind got stronger and stronger, the tornado increased in size. Enel could hardly stay in place as Luffy looked at him. His eyes had changed color, now having the same color as ice in a frozen lake. You will never win against a god. Enel shouted derisively as he used his staff. Lightning formed above his head before changing shape. Enel sent a giant electric dragon head towards Luffy, who stood in place. The wind enveloped him like armor. Enel smirked, knowing there was no way for the pirates to dodge it, and he was proven right as the dragon head collided with Luffy. A blind light engulfed the entire sky as bolts of white lightning spread everywhere, and the whole tree shook violently. Was that it? I have to be honest. I'm disappointed, Enel gasped as the dust cloud that engulfed the new crater blasted away, and Luffy stepped forward. Enel felt his heart beating in his throat at the sight before him. The white part of his eyes had turned a shade of red, while his eyes were the color of ice. His body was covered by winds that seemed like long snakes that swirled around it as if Luffy were their master. The snake head made of wind rested on Luffy's shoulder as Luffy kept moving forward, glaring at Enel, who gulped loudly. Since I arrived here, all I heard was about you. Everyone told me how you were a god and could never be defeated. Now, please tell me this is not all you can do. Luffy spoke with a sneer as a broad smile engulfed his face, but instead of smiling back, Enel felt terrified by that smile. It was unsettling. Suddenly, he heard the sound of the tip of his staff hitting the ground repeatedly, and he realized it. I'm shaking, Enel thought, but instead of backing away, he slammed his feet on the ground before letting out a cry. The clouds turned black above them as bolts of lightning struck around them, but not one of them hit Luffy, despite Enel more than once directing them towards the pirate who didn't feel threatened. I'm a god, you filthy pirate, Enel shouted as lightning enveloped him once again. I have been a god for decades. Do you really think an ant like you can stand on the same level as me? Enel shouted with rage as the bolts of lightning increased in size, many taking forms, looking like dragon heads. Who said anything about standing on the same level as you? You are so small. You are not but a mere stepping stone for me. Not even that, you are just someone with a powerful enough devil fruit, and that's why you hide here because you know that down there, all your power will amount to nothing. You are so pathetic. You came here because you know you are weak. and only the smallest inconvenience has caused you to lose all the control you had. Look at yourself. All you have now is whatever scrap of ego you have left, and all you can do is shout how you are a god, hoping that the actual god will give you some miracle, but gods will not help you. Even Kobe, for how weak he was when I met him, even he was braver than you. You are nothing but a child who found a nest full of ants and acted like a god amongst them, completely ignoring the approaching storm. Luffy spoke with an echo in his voice that caused the entire tree to shake, which Enel noticed, looking up at Luffy with even more fear, a fear he wanted to hide. "Shut up. You are nothing but s." Enel shouted as he used all the strength he had. The bolts of lightning quickly came together in a single place above them. Luffy watched unbothered as the bolts of lightning changed color, turning a shade of black. Suddenly, an enormous dragon head appeared from the clouds, roaring down at Luffy, who looked back at it unbothered. "That's a very big lizard. I'm so scared," said Luffy with a sneer before looking back at Enel, whose lightning around his body had turned black like those above them. Enel had a broad smile, licking his lips slowly before laughing loudly. "You will pay for what you said, filthy pirates, and once I'm done with you, I will kill every single person down there that you call friend, but don't worry, I will let you live long enough and simply watch as I butcher all of them," Enel claimed with a burst of sinister laughter. He expected Luffy to get angry, but the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates stared blankly at him. "Is talking all you can do?" Enel quickly rushed at him, and with his staff at hand, he promptly slashed forward, but Luffy easily dodged his attack by stepping aside. His eyes remained fixed on Enel, who felt like he was looking at the devil himself. "That's not an attack. This is an attack," Luffy said as the wind snake rushed towards him with its mouth open. Enel quickly turned his entire body into lightning, expecting the wind snake's teeth to pass through his body, but instead, he let out a scream of pain as the teeth sunk deep into his shoulder. "Go away, devil!" Enel screamed in pain as he quickly used his lightning to get away, trying to gain some distance. Luffy simply stared at him, unimpressed. His wind snake returned to Luffy's shoulder, and just like the captain, he, too, had a smile on his face. "I need to use my weapon right now. This is getting bad. Whoever he is strong." Enel's thoughts trailed off as he fell to his knees. He felt it rushing up to his mouth. He closed his mouth in desperation, trying to hold it inside, but he couldn't. His mouth opened, and he puked a chunk of dark blood from his mouth. He breathed heavily, sweat rolling down his face, his vision blurred. "Why is my blood changing color and becoming thicker?" Enel gasped as he looked at his shoulder, the place where the snake had bitten him. The holes had opened more, but that wasn't the worst. The veins near his shoulder were turning darker, suddenly visible through the skin. "So you noticed, congratulations," Luffy said mockingly before laughing as he approached the fallen god menacingly. "What did you do? How can you inject poison inside me? Your snakes are made of wind," Enel demanded, before coughing more blood and using his staff to stand up somehow. He would never be on a pirate S like this man. "Who said anything about poison?" Luffy asked with a mocking chuckle as the wind snake let out a similar sound, as if they were mocking Enel, who finally stood up. His entire left arm had swelled, and his skin had turned a deep shade of red, the veins visible through the skin and with dark blood rushing through them. "What is it then?" Enel demanded as his vision got even more blurry. He could see the dark veins slowly approaching his heart. He tried to use his mantra to fight back the infection, but no matter how hard he tried, the dark blood kept advancing through his body. "Why would a dead man need to know that?" Luffy questioned coldly, his voice making Enel panic. Grappling his staff as hard as possible, he quickly raised it towards the dragon head above them before bringing his staff down with all his strength. The black dragon's head let out a mighty roar that echoed for hundreds of miles away before rushing right at Luffy, who looked up at him without a hint of fear in his eyes. A massive explosion of black lightning engulfed the entire beanstalk. Those at the bottom looked as the massive tree started shaking violently. Suddenly, the top started collapsing, bursting into flames that quickly engulfed the entire thing. "Who did that?" Chopper shouted in fear. Usopp gulped hard at the sight of the top of the massive beanstalk falling down as if made of paper, feeling fear at the sight of such power. But he looked at everyone else. Even Nami didn't look frightened, so despite the fear he was feeling, Usopp didn't cover in fear this time. Instead, he quickly refilled his revolvers with more ammo. Come on, Luffy. Where are you? There's no way this is your end, Usopp thought. Sweat rolling down his face as the top of the tree fell down, crashing on the upper yard. A large dirt cloud covered the entire thing. Was Luffy defeated? Cricket asked fearfully, but as he looked at the straw hats, he could see that none of them seemed concerned, not even the Dr. Deer. He wasn't sure what his name was. The answer to his question came in the form of a figure crashing down. As the dust cloud faded away, Enel lay on the ground on his back. His entire body was bruised, with hundreds of cuts and dark veins spread all around his body, but he wasn't alone. Just as Wiper was ready to do the finishing blow, he was stopped when Luffy walked out of the dust cloud. But he was different. Many gulped at the sight of Luffy. He looked terrifying as he kneeled down to Enel, looking down at him as if he were a mere ant. How the mighty have called, tell me, how does it feel to be an ant? Luffy asked with a wide grin that only made Enel shiver in fear. But that was nothing when Luffy grabbed him by the throat. You attacked my nakama. I never forgive someone who does that. Enel opened his mouth and screamed in pain, his body thrashing around. But Luffy wasn't letting go of him, and the scream only got louder and louder. Cricket watched as the one who was seen as an unstoppable god now was screaming in pain at the mercy of a pirate. How about I made your body boil? Luffy asked with an innocent smile. His grip around Enel's throat grew tighter. He could hardly breathe as he kept screaming in pain. His skin started blistering. It seemed as if his skin was boiling. The fingernails began falling off his fingers, sliding down as his skin turned bright red and black. And the black veins underneath became more and more apparent. Luffy, just kill him. But their captain wasn't listening as Enel's scream grew louder and louder. His skin started peeling off his chest, revealing the red meat underneath, and his dark veins spilled open like sieves. Luffy, enough! Nami shouted with a hint of desperation as she ran up to him, hugging him from behind, her arms around him. This made Luffy let go of Enel and go silent as Nami hugged him from behind, her head resting against his back. Is enough, Luffy. We all are safe. It's over. Nami spoke softly from behind, not wanting to let go as Luffy slowly turned back to normal. His eyes turned normal, and the wind snakes disappeared. Thank you, Nami, Luffy said with gratitude before reaching up, his hand closing around Nami's hand tightly, almost afraid that she would disappear. Slowly, Nami pulled away from him, allowing Luffy to turn around and look at her. His left hand cupped her cheek when Nami noticed something that made her gasp. Your arm! Nami shouted, pointing at his right arm. Luffy looked down at it. The charred dark skin had recovered, now looking much healthier, but there were still quite a few black spots around his arm, and there was a long scar like a thin snake that ran from his wrist all the way to his shoulder. But Luffy wasn't bothered, and for the first time since the fight with Akainu, he tried to move his right hand. He winced in pain but still slowly moved it, and his hand closed into a fist. Nami smiled in joy to see that. The other crewmates looked happy to see their captain recovering. Robin felt her heart swell with joy at the sight, still remembering the way he protected her from Enel. Wiper, this war is over. Tell the whole Sky Island that Enel is dead. Luffy shouted. Wiper quickly roared in happiness, raising his arm. After years of fighting, they finally won against the one everyone considered a god. The moment word spread of Enel's defeat, the air shifted, buzzing with celebration. Food and drinks appeared as if conjured, the island's people coming alive with joy. A massive bonfire roared in the center, flames licking the star-studded sky as villagers and warriors alike danced wildly around it. Luffy's crew sprawled near the fire, indulging with abandon. Vivi, for once, allowed herself to let go, her father, her responsibilities, the kingdom fading into the background. Her laughter joined the cacophony, light and free, as she leaned into the moment. Yet deep inside, she knew this reprieve would be fleeting. Choices awaited her that she could no longer ignore. Zoro, meanwhile, was locked in a fierce beer-drinking competition with Nami. His trademark scowl deepened as Nejico leaned over with a smirk. Zoro, I know my sister. You're doomed. No one beats her at this. Watch me, Zoro growled, slamming his emptied mug next to Nami's with a ferocity that made Usopp flinch. Nami's devilish grin widened as she tapped her fingers against her cup. Care to make it interesting, Mosshead? 10 million berries to the winner. Zoro's eye twitched, but his pride burned brighter. Deal. Robin chuckled softly from the sidelines, her amusement evident as she sipped her wine. Luffy, mid-bite of a turkey leg, laughed uproariously. She. Zoro, you're in trouble. Nami's the undefeated champ. Ignoring the warning, Zoro leaned into his promise. I don't lose. Not to witches, not to swordsmen, and definitely not to her. The contest escalated. Barrel after barrel of beer was drained, Chopper waving his arms in a desperate plea. Stop it. You're going to get alcohol poisoning. But his protests were drowned out by the cheering crew. Nami's face glowed red, her eyelids drooping, while Zoro swayed, his body teetering with every sip. By the 41st round, Usopp called out, another, pouring fresh beer into their mugs. As they lifted them, Zoro faltered. Halfway through, his hand slipped, the glass tumbling to the ground as he collapsed in a snoring heap. Nami wins. Luffy shouted, lifting her triumphantly. She cheered, tossing back her last drink before tossing the mug into the fire. Luffy grinned up at her, his arms wrapped tightly around her waist. Pain flickered in his injured arm, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the way Nami smiled at him. She bent down suddenly, capturing his lips in a kiss that drew cheers and whistles from the crew. Sanji's gaze darkened, jealousy flickering across his features. But he sighed, looking away. Seeing Nami happy, even with the idiot captain, softened the blow. He turned toward the edge of the party, where the older knight lingered, watching from a distance with his horse band of parties. Sanji asked, exhaling a plume of smoke as he approached. The knight's gaze didn't waver from the bonfire. It's been so long since we've had peace. Fear of Enel became our way of life. Even now, I can scarcely believe he's gone. Sanji flicked ash from his cigarette, a thoughtful look crossing his face. Yeah, fear's a bastard. But if you let the past chain you down, you'll never move forward. He offered the knight a cigarette. After a moment's hesitation, the old man accepted. As Sanji lit it, the knight coughed violently on the first drag, but the second came easier. Thank you, chef of the Straw Hats. Sanji's brows lifted slightly. Got ghosts of your own? The knight asked, his tone probing. The cook froze, memories flashing unbidden. A man with hair like his, 3 other faces he despised, and one, golden-haired and kind. That lingered like an ache in his chest. Yeah, he said finally, his voice low. He didn't elaborate, settling instead onto a low tree branch and letting his gaze drift back to the fire. Luffy, in the firelight, was performing an absurd, improvised dance. Sanji huffed a laugh but paused when he heard a sharp inhale. Turning, he saw the knight staring at Luffy, his expression stunned. What's wrong? Sanji asked, frowning. The old man shook his head quickly, his eyes shadowed. Nothing. It's just, he reminds me of someone. Sanji didn't press, though suspicion lingered. Instead, he looked back to the party as laughter erupted. Usopp was making ridiculous faces, prompting Luffy to double over with his signature, carefree laugh. Later, Robin, are you sure it's here? Luffy questioned as he used the ball of air for his crew to float along with him, including the Monkey Brothers and Wiper. Yes, Captain. It should be around here somewhere. Robin answered as they floated above a sea of clouds, even higher than the beanstalk. All they could see were clouds everywhere. Cricket and his Monkey Brothers looked quite nervous. They were sweating despite not being that hot up here. There, Cricket abruptly shouted, pointing a finger at the far distance. The others quickly looked at where he was pointing. Luffy squinted his eyes and saw something glittering above a cloud. Yes, there's definitely gold there, Nami shouted, her eyes turning into berry signs, much to Zoro's disgust, who murmured, which, under his breath, but his choice of words didn't sit well with Nami. Zoro, you officially owe me 10 million berries. Nami reminded him with a greedy smile, rubbing her hands together. Zoro growled, looking away, much to the amusement of the crew, especially Sanji, who was greatly satisfied by seeing the moss head being put in his place. Luffy laughed out loud as he increased the speed of the airball, but Usopp noticed that it wasn't going as fast as it did last time. Luffy, why are you not going faster? Because we are much higher now, the higher I go, the weaker this ball of air becomes, and I'm pretty sure if I keep going higher, eventually this ball will pop and we all will fall to our deaths. Luffy japed with a wide grin, but the crewmates weren't as amused. "That's not funny, Luffy," Usopp berated his captain, who simply laughed it off. "It must have to do with the air not being as dense up here," Nami reasoned as they approached the shining thing in the distance. That must be the Shandorian Golden Belfry Bell," Cricket finished for his brother, looking amazed at the sight. The airball disappeared as they reached the cloud. Their feet could stand on the cloud's surface, but all their attention was on the giant golden bell before them. Standing on a platform that was also made of gold, which glittered against the sunlight, the bell was supported by two large golden beams that made it stand 3 feet above the platform. The platform had 2 sets of staircases that led to the bell. They quickly noticed that it was covered in plants and tree branches. The gold was covered in moss in many places, but that didn't take away from its beauty. "It's real. I can't believe it after so long," Cricket said, amazed, tears rolling down his face. He looked at the bell and could almost see a vision of Noland shaking hands with someone who looked similar to Wiper. "Now, this is your chance to prove everyone, even those down there, that Noland was no liar," Wiper reminded him, placing a hand on Cricket's shoulder. The latter knew that, and without saying a word, he strode forward, climbing up the stairs and reaching the golden bell. His hands grasped the heavy clapper of the bell. Cricket took a deep breath before moving the clapper. It felt like moving a house, but he would never give up. He moved it towards himself with all his strength, and with a roar, he pushed it forward, and the bell rang. "Wooowwwwww." Chopper stared, amazed at the sight as its beautiful melody echoed for miles ahead. Undoubtedly would be heard all the way to the blue sea. Luffy smiled in satisfaction to see Cricket and his monkey brothers sharing a big hug as the bell kept ringing for everyone to hear. Nami, while she would want to take that bell with her, she knew Luffy wouldn't allow her to take this one bell. "Luffy, can we take that bell with us, pretty please?" Nami begged with puppy eyes while pushing up her breasts. Knowing how much Luffy loved to play with them every time they fucked. Despite her best attempt, Luffy smiled widely before putting his arm around her waist, bringing her closer to him. "Nope," Luffy said with a burst of laughter when Nami pouted loudly before trying to escape his grasp but not really giving it all. "Hey, don't make that face, Nami. Last time I checked, there's an entire city of gold just waiting for us," he whispered with a grin, which made Nami squeal. Her eyes turned to berry signs, and now she remembered why she loved her captain so much. "Thank you, Luffy," Nami shouted before kissing him on the lips, but eventually, they pulled away when they saw Robin approaching the platform. "This is a poneglyph," Robin said, astonished as she strode towards the one thing in this place that wasn't made of gold. Luffy looked down and saw that underneath the bell, in front of the platform made of gold, was a square part that wasn't made of gold. "What does it say, Robin?" Luffy asked as he approached her as she read what was written, but Luffy noticed something that caught him off guard. On the side of the poneglyph, words that looked similar to those written on the poneglyph were carved into the gold near. Gold D. Roger was here, Luffy. It said that he was able to carve this message with the help of a man named Kazuki Oden. Robin answered, looking back at him with a look of amazement. "Wait, I thought his name was Gold Roger?" Vivi asked in confusion. "That doesn't seem to be the case. I doubt the Pirate King would get his own name wrong," Robin answered as she wrote something in a notebook. Luffy gave her a nod. She knew they would have a private discussion later on about what was written in the poneglyph. Robin was delighted that her captain wanted to know more about One Piece and the Void Century. After marveling at the golden bell for an hour, Luffy decided the time had come for them to return. "Should we return the bell to its place? I'm sure I can carry it with my airball," Luffy asked Wiper and Cricket, and they both smiled brightly. That was more than enough. With Luffy's help, the bell was once again returned to its rightful place, and the crowd cheered in joy. 4 days later, in the dead of night, a loud whisper pierced the quiet. "Vivi, wake up. We're stealing the gold and running." Luffy's enthusiastic voice was barely subdued. Vivi groaned, burying her face into the pillow. "Whatever you're planning, just do it quietly." "I'm sleeping," she mumbled, her voice muffled and thick with exhaustion. "But Vivi, we're pirates. Pirates live for treasure," Luffy protested, bouncing slightly on his heels like an overexcited child. "Treasure or not, I'd rather sleep," she replied flatly, eyes still closed. Unfortunately, take no for an answer. By the time the sun thought about rising, she found herself stumbling groggily behind him, Nami, Usopp, and Chopper, who were all venturing toward the giant snake's remains. Zoro remained behind, engrossed in his morning training routine, the sound of his blades cutting through the cool air punctuating the quiet. Vivi lingered near him, arms crossed as her thoughts churned. Zoro's rhythmic movements caught her eye. After a while, he sheathed his swords, glancing at her with the sharp, perceptive gaze she was starting to associate with him. "You're thinking about your father again, aren't you?" he asked bluntly. Vivi stiffened but didn't deny it. "Yes," she murmured. Zoro exhaled, his expression unreadable, then stopped. Her head snapped up, disbelief flaring in her eyes. "What? How can you say that? My father is alone, my kingdom is falling apart." "Why did you come with us?" Zoro interrupted, his tone calm but firm. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no ready answer. The weight of his question hung in the air, pressing down on her. "You joined us knowing what you were leaving behind," Zoro continued, crossing his arms. "We're not a family you can come and go from whenever the mood strikes. Every one of us left something behind to be here. Usopp's got a girl waiting for him, but you don't see him moping. Nami fought tooth and nail to free her village, and she still chose this life. Hell, even Sanji walked away from the only people he could call family. We all gave up something, princess. You're not special. So figure out what you want and do it fast, we don't have room for hesitation." With that, he turned and strode past her, his words lingering like an open wound. Vivi stood there, stunned into silence, as the truth of his statement settled uncomfortably in her chest. The faint breeze carried with it the scent of sand, stirring memories of Alabasta, her father, and long-forgotten conversations. One, in particular. "Love is the death of duty, Vivi," her father had said as they strolled through the palace garden. His voice was grave yet tender. "What does that mean?" her younger self had asked, wide-eyed. "A time will come when you must choose between what you love and what your duty demands. Love complicates everything. It makes the easy choices hard and the hard choices unbearable. What is honor compared to the love of a woman? What is duty against the laughter of a child? The gods have fashioned us for love, and that is both our strength and our weakness. But you are a princess, and for us, duty always weighs heavier. One day, Vivi, you will have to choose and carry that choice with you forever." The words hit harder now than they ever had. Her hands trembled slightly as she clenched them into fists. "Vivi, are you okay?" Nijiko's voice broke through her haze. The blue-haired woman stood nearby, watching her with concern. Vivi blinked, tears slipping unbidden down her cheeks, but her eyes gleamed with newfound resolve. "I've made my decision," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Nijiko said nothing, only nodding in silent understanding. Vivi turned her gaze toward the Going Merry, its silhouette glowing faintly in the dawn light. "From now on," she declared, her voice firmer now, "I'm not just Princess Vivi of Alabasta. I'm Vivi, a pirate of the Straw Hats." They went back to the city. "Hey, Robin. Vivi, hurry up. We're running away. We stole some gold," Luffy yelled from the other side. "We're richer now." The Sky People were shocked to see them leave already and were about to give them the piece of gold, but apparently, the other pirates misunderstood and thought they were angry they took the gold. Vivi cut a small piece of it off. "Looks like they don't need it," before they both ran over to the others. They ran toward the ship and were ready to sail back to the Blue Sea. The only way down was to go to a place called Cloud's End. Everybody was sad to leave but excited to go back, but Conus and her father were there to see them off. "Thank you all for saving us," Conus shouted, waving her arms at the pirates with tears in her eyes. Her father stood beside her, looking at them all with gratitude. But before the pirates could sail away, they saw Cricket and his monkey brothers approaching. "Cricket, come on. We are leaving," Luffy shouted with his wide smile, but they were all caught off guard when Cricket shook his head, much to their surprise. Even Robin seemed like she wasn't expecting that. "Not today. Straw Hat Luffy. I want to spend more time here and write about this place, and when I'm ready, me and my brothers. We will build a ship here using the trees on the forest, and one day go back to the Blue Sea, but not today," Cricket announced before grabbing his pirate hat, something Masira and Shoju did likewise, and placed it against their chests. "Monkey D. Luffy, from now on, the the Sarayama Alliance is your ally. If you ever need our help, call us, and we will be there to help, even if it costs our lives," Cricket shouted, followed by a roar of approval from his two brothers. Luffy smiled widely before handing them a Vivre card so they would know where to go if they ever needed help. "Thank you for helping us, for saving Skypiea," the Sky People shouted. Their voices echoed for miles ahead, with Usopp and Chopper waving back at them. Even Luffy waved at them with his injured arm as they sailed away. The south bird they caught back at Jaya landed on the ship, and the next island's course was already set. "Be careful during the drop," the blonde girl yelled, and a second later, the Going Merry went for a free fall down 10,000 meters. Everybody's eyes were out of their skulls, and screaming was heard throughout the sky. Suddenly, a giant octopus flew out of the sky and caught the ship with its tentacles. Zoro was about to cut it when most of them fell hard on the deck. The animal held them like a huge balloon, slowly lowering them down to the sea. Vivi smiled. "This adventure has been amazing." They descended, and the golden bell sending them off made it perfect. Vivi sat on the rail and enjoyed the ride down. The world was full of surprises, and it was never boring. It felt like they were floating in the sky. The sun was about to set, and they were getting closer and closer to the sea. That was until Sanji noticed that the octopus was getting smaller, and soon it shrunk completely. Once again, there was a free fall down, and Nijiko leaned over the rail and made a spring of water to lower it gently. It was heavy and getting harder to hold, but when the ship finally touched the sea, Nijiko could breathe again. The thought of them sailing with a damaged ship had given her a bit of a scare, but it was understandable. They were falling 10,000 kilometers, and the ship might not even survive. Vivi was so happy to be back. While she enjoyed the Sky Islands, she enjoyed being down here much more, especially now that breathing was much easier. "It seems even further away after falling from it," Robin started. "It's like we were dreaming," Nami said and looked up. "Well, it was a country of dreams. Think you'll be able to go there again someday?" Chopper wondered. "We'll be able to go there when we die or close enough," Zoro answered. "Zoro, you think you're going to make it to heaven?" Usopp asked, surprised. Everyone laughed as Sanji told everyone to get inside so they could eat something. While waiting, Nami got the bags of gold and told them they would divide it between them, but she would get 80% of it. Vivi found it amusing when the guys complained, and she quickly said, "Just kidding." Vivi smiled as she stretched out her arms. For the first time since the journey started, she didn't know why, but she felt much more relaxed than ever before. She had made her decision to stay, and her face looked much brighter now, something that a few noticed but didn't bother pointing out. "We need to find someone who can fix our ship. Going Merry is not going to last long in this condition," Luffy said, his voice suddenly changing from goofy to captain's voice. He looked at all the gold they had now and wondered how much they would need to fix the ship. He figured they needed a lot of gold, but that wasn't all that was going through his head. Zoro and Nami had informed him of Nijiko's abilities. He had wanted to ask her after they escaped Akainu, but with his injured arm and his mental condition not being the best, Luffy had completely forgotten about it. Now, he made a mental note to have a private discussion with Nijiko about her powers and everything. "Luffy." He looked up to see Vivi approaching him, standing in the middle of the deck. She looked a little nervous as she cleared her throat, loud enough to grab everyone's attention quickly. "Everyone. I have to say something." Everyone fell silent as Sanji let out a puff of smoke from his mouth. Everyone's eyes were on Vivi, whose eyes were focused on Luffy, who sat down on the staircase leading to the captain's quarters and motioned for her to continue. "Since I joined this crew, I have never had this much fun in my whole life, but when Akainu told me what happened back at home, I would be a liar if I said that I didn't regret joining the crew." No one said anything. No one looked at her with anger and waited for her to continue. "I wanted to return to my father. I wanted to return to my country, to tell them that they are all important to me. That I haven't forgotten about them, but I have realized that in a way, I'm not really a princess anymore. I'm Vivi, a pirate of the Straw Hats. That's who I am." Everyone quickly applauded, and even Zoro clapped a few times as Nami jumped Vivi, hugging her tightly. "Welcome back," she shouted, and the two were quickly joined by the rest of the crew besides Zoro, who rolled his eyes at their antics, and Robin, who enjoyed the sight of them, but she found herself not smiling. "Welcome back, Vivi," Luffy shouted before turning around and facing Robin. "Did you leave it in my room?" he asked eagerly with a wide grin. And the archaeologist told him that it was inside his room. Everyone looked at one another, wondering what was inside Luffy's room, and their question arrived in the form of Luffy carrying 2 small treasure boxes. "More treasure?" Nami shouted with berry eyes, but much to her disappointment, Luffy shook his head as he grabbed a nearby table, placed the 2 boxes on top of it, and moved the table in front of Vivi, who looked at her captain in confusion. "You can choose one of them, Vivi, or neither. The choice is yours," Luffy told her as he opened the 2 boxes before her, and the former princess gasped at the sight before her. She might not know as much as them about piracy and that sort of thing, but she knew what was in front of her. On the right box is Enel's devil fruit, Guro Guro no Mi, and on the left box is Crocodile's devil fruit, Suna Suna no Mi. You can choose to have one or neither, but you can't have both. People die if they eat 2 devil fruits, Luffy informed her, and everyone backed away to give her space. Vivi was left looking down at the fruits, not sure which one to choose. "Sanji, will you get the one that Vivi will not choose?" Usopp asked curiously, both of them still watching Vivi, who was observing the fruits. "Nope, the one I want is different," Sanji said with a perverted smile. Zoro rolled his eyes before Mrm's stupid blonde chef, and Nami felt a shiver of creepiness in her body, not just her, but every woman in the world. "What about you, Usopp?" "I would have chosen the lightning one, but I have already eaten a devil fruit," Chopper asked curiously, looking up at Usopp, who quickly shook his head. "If I ever eat one, it will be a different one, something that might come in handy with my revolvers and aim," Usopp answered reluctantly, wondering if he should really eat one, even if they found one that suited him. Usopp remembered his captain telling him his father was no devil fruit user. "Luffy, I have been wondering. Devil fruits are quite big in size. What happens if 2 people take a bite out of a single devil fruit at the same time?" Usopp asked curiously as he scratched the top of his head. Luffy looked deep in thought. He hadn't really thought about it, but he remembered what Shanks had told him a long time ago when he was still training under him. "Shanks once told me there can never be 2 people having the same devil fruit at the same time, so in that case, if 2 people take a bit out of the same devil fruit, I think one of them will get the devil fruit ability, while the other will get nothing," Luffy said with a small shrug of his shoulders. "This one," Vivi suddenly decided, making everyone look at her as she grabbed a devil fruit. Without a single moment of hesitation, she took a large bite out of it. The moment it entered her mouth, she felt the terrible taste in her tongue. Disgusting. She spit out small bits of the devil fruit, but she forced herself to swallow small bits of it. What was left of the devil fruit slipped from her hands, and everyone watched as the rest of the devil fruit suddenly lost all the color that made it unique, now looking like a completely normal fruit. "So, how does it feel?" Luffy asked eagerly as Vivi spread her arms. She was suddenly engulfed by a sandstorm. She watched as her arms turned to sand before reforming back to normal. She had never felt something like this before. "Congratulations, Vivi!" Luffy shouted as everyone congratulated her, but when Vivi tried to hug Luffy, she passed through him, her body turning to sand and back to normal. "What the hell?" Vivi shouted, irritated, as she lay on her stomach, looking at her hands. Before standing up, she touched herself almost cautiously. She expected her fingers to turn into sand, but much to her relief, she could still touch her face, and her hands felt warmer now. "Don't worry, Vivi. This is normal. It took a whole weekend for Ace to control his body after eating the fire fruit," Luffy told her as he used his haki to touch her face. Vivi smiled at him tenderly before hugging him tightly, her arms around his neck, and kissing him in front of everyone. "We really don't have to see that. How about you 2 find a room?" Usopp groaned as he walked away, followed by Chopper, who clapped cutely at the sight of Luffy kissing Vivi. Luffy was happy that Vivi had finally made her decision, and with the new power he had, he knew he was more prepared to fight against admirals. A man slowly walked to the shore. He looked around anxiously, but no one was nearby except a few seagulls on top of a cactus tree. He quickly unzipped his pants and edged closer to the shore, ready to relieve the tension he was feeling. He felt the sand under his feet and the small waves tickling his feet. "Oi, what are you doing?" The man let out a scream as he tried to run away, only to trip on his own pants that were dangling around his knees. He fell face flat on the sand, his face turning red. He quickly turned around to see a tall man in front of him, looking down with a look of disgust. "Where the hell did you come from? Can't a man have some privacy?" the man shouted, feeling embarrassed when he noticed something odd. The man is incredibly tall, slim, yet muscular, at 298 centimeters tall. He has black, curly hair cut to chin length that fans out at the tips, tanned skin, and an altogether lean, long build. His outfit consists of a white buttoned-up vest with a standing collar over a long-sleeved navy blue shirt, matching white trousers, and black dress shoes. This is rarely accompanied by a matching white suit jacket. He also wears a yellow tie divided geometrically by black lines and a sleep mask on his forehead. "Sure, you can have all the privacy you want, but not here. Don't torture the fishes. They don't want to get sick," the tall man said as water vapor came out of his mouth. He spoke as if it was freezing outside, but it was very warm around them despite being the middle of the night. "Okay," the man said grumpily as he stood up and wore back his pants, ready to walk away when the tall man's voice reached his ears. "One more thing, have you happened to see a pirate ship around here?" "Pirate ship?" he asked confusedly as he turned around to face the tall man. Only now did he notice the bicycle leaning against the man's waist. "Yes, one in particular. Its flag is a skull with a straw hat. Days passed since their adventure in Skypia ended. The crew had decided to take a break for now. Rest for at least 3 months first before they start their next adventure. Luffy had told everyone they would use these 3 months to train. It was simple. Upon finding a good enough island to train, they all decided to stay there for 3 months and train to get stronger. Usopp was still a little scared, but since the fight against Enel, he seemed a little braver, and the crew soon realized just how ruthless Luffy could be with them. Upon finding the island, Luffy told everyone they would fight against him with the intention of killing him. This caught a few off guard, except for Zoro and a few others. Usopp and Chopper didn't seem to like the idea. "But Luffy, all of us against you. Are you sure?" Usopp couldn't help himself but ask with a hint of concern, with Chopper nodding in agreement. "If I die, then I wasn't a good enough captain. Now fight me," Luffy ordered, releasing a wave of his Conqueror's haki, making it clear that he wasn't playing around. Usopp and Chopper gulped, feeling the dizziness caused by Conqueror's haki. Fortunately, they were able to stay conscious. "Very well, Captain," Zoro said casually as he wrapped the green bandana around his forehead, holding all 3 of his swords right away. He knew it would be foolish to underestimate his own captain. Nami's eyes turned golden, with a red hue that made them glitter like the eyes of a hunter. Golden wings formed on her back. Her skin started changing. Golden tiny scales, snake-like scales, formed around her skin. Her fingernails grew, ready to tear apart someone. 2 orbs of fire formed above her wings, with droplets of lava dripping down from the bottom. Sanji let out a puff of smoke from his lips before throwing away the rest of the cigarette left with a flicker of his fingers. He started spinning, and his right leg glowed yellow as if made of magma, emitting dark steam. Robin crossed her arms, creating arms around her ground, but that wasn't all. Suddenly, her arms started glowing pink before emitting steam, setting the grass near them ablaze. Cracks formed around Vivi's right arm. Soon, the skin changed color, turning golden, and the cracks grew in size. Bits of her arm fell to the ground below, turning into sand. A whip of water formed around Nejiko's arm, and the whip's tip changed form, turning into Lion's head with glowing green eyes. Nejiko's eyes changed. The color and the white in her eyes became one before changing and turning blue like water. The others glanced briefly at her with a hint of doubt, especially Nami. After Vivi had eaten the sand devil fruit, Luffy had demanded from Nejiko to tell him how she could use water during the fight against Akainu. What Nejiko had told them shocked them, especially Nami, who wasn't sure how to feel about what her sister told her. She knew Nejiko was hiding something from her, but having a voice in her head that claimed to be a god wasn't on the list of things she expected. Nejiko had explained that she herself wasn't sure who this voice was, but it had granted her the ability to control water to a degree. As long as she got stronger, she could control more water. Chopper turned into his humanoid form, and Usopp grabbed both his revolvers. Start! Zoro and Sanji quickly rushed forward as if challenging each other to see who could hit the captain first. Ultimately, it was Zoro who made the first move. He quickly slashed forward, sending a wind wave toward his captain. Zoro's slash caused the tree behind Luffy to be sliced in half from top to bottom. Luffy had sidestepped at the last second, dodging the deadly attack, but Zoro noticed something that shocked him. "I will have my revenge for all the girls that you stole," Sanji shouted Padua, raising his leg and kicking towards his head. But he watched as Luffy ducked easily, his eyes closed. He wasn't even using armament haki. What the hell? Luffy quickly jumped away just in time as a barrage of golden blades collided with the ground he was standing on, causing it to crack and explode, sending chunks of ground everywhere. Nami wasn't done yet. The fire orbs fused with her chest, and suddenly, her entire body was burning like a phoenix. Her head changed, looking like a red phoenix, and her hair burned blue behind her head. She dove down towards Luffy, who clenched his teeth as she collided with him in a fiery explosion. Trees burst into flames, and the wind and the fire turned everything into a melted landscape. The animals ran away as far as they could. Nijiko sent a massive water dragon to form a water wall around the growing flames, which slowly started fading away, emitting steam in the air. Luffy winced in pain, his arms black with armament haki, but he had no time to rest as Nami quickly swung her right wing forward like an enormous blade. Luffy easily dodged this one. Fireball. Nami shot 5 fireballs that Luffy once again dodged as he kept jumping away from each attack, but as he landed on the ground, 2 sets of giant arms burst out of the ground, grabbing hold of his ankles. "You are not going anywhere," Robin shouted as she crossed her arms before making a sign with her index and thumb. Suddenly, Luffy was punched everywhere around his body, the wounds quite visible, with bruises forming around his body, forcing him to open his eyes as a massive water dragon rushed towards him from above. "Water pressure," Nijiko shouted as the dragon collided with Luffy, forming a sphere of water. "Electric charge," Usopp shouted as he fired a bullet at the water sphere, causing the entire thing to glow yellow. This burst of electricity shocked Luffy as he screamed in pain. Then Nijiko closed her fists, causing the sphere to shrink for a moment to the size of Luffy, only for it to expand and explode in a burst of water. This caused all nearby trees to fall down like toothpicks, followed by droplets of water falling down. "Luffy," Chopper shouted, worried and sick. He rushed forward, ready to check if he was alright. "Wait, Chopper," her words interrupted as a wind wave caused everyone to be blasted away. Even Zoro flew high in the air before slamming down against the ground, while Nami was using her wings to fly above them, looking down at her captain. The smoke dirt was blown away from the crater, revealing Luffy, who had entered his new gear. Gear 2nd. Typhoon Man, Snake Wind. 2 giant wind snakes rushed forward toward the crew. Many jumped away, but 2 weren't as lucky. Vivi and Usopp. The snakes opened their mouths wide before swallowing them inside the wind body. The 2 wind snakes started shrinking, forming 2 orbs of wind hovering above the ground. The princess quickly tried to turn her body into sand and escape the sphere, but the moment she tried, her hand turned into sand, grumbling down, only for it to immediately reform back into a normal hand despite Vivi wanting to do the opposite. "Take this." Usopp fired with his revolver, only for the bullet to crumble to dust the moment it left the firearm. "No hope," Luffy murmured as he closed both his hands. Vivi and Usopp's eyes went wide. Their bodies no longer moved, simply floating inside the wind sphere, their limbs moving limply. The wind orbs broke down slowly, the wind spreading out of them. Eventually, the orbs faded away, and Vivi and Usopp fell down on the ground, both unconscious. Zoro felt the sweat on his forehead, and Sanji grinded his teeth as Luffy marched towards them without a hint of fear in his eyes. If anything, he seemed a little disappointed. "Is that all you can do?" Luffy shouted with a hint of dissatisfaction. "Not even close, dear Captain," Sanji shouted determinedly as they all rushed towards him for round 2. The unrelenting sun beat down on the Thousand Sunny as Monkey D. Luffy pushed his crew beyond their limits. For 60 brutal days, their captain had transformed from the carefree captain man they knew into a merciless taskmaster. Again, Luffy would bark, sweat glistening on his muscled torso as he effortlessly blades. "You're still too slow, all of you." No one escaped his intense regimen. Day after day, They collapsed into exhausted heaps while Luffy stood victorious, hands on hips, that infectious grin replaced by a stern determination they'd rarely witnessed. "We won't survive the new world if we're weak," became his daily mantra. Finally, after 2 months of grueling training that left muscles screaming and bodies bruised, Luffy relented. "Take the afternoon," he announced after their morning session, reaching for his straw hat. "You've earned it." The male crew members practically sprinted toward the nearby island to forage, leaving Nami and Robin alone on the ship's deck. "I thought he'd never ease up," Nami groaned, stretching her aching limbs before collapsing onto a lounge chair. Robin chuckled softly, her raven hair cascading over her shoulders. "Our captain has grown quite focused." Without discussion, both women slipped out of their sweat-dampened clothes. The privacy of the empty ship and the heat of the day made nudity the most natural choice. Nami sighed contentedly as the sea breeze caressed her bare skin. "Being naked feels incredible after being drenched in sweat all morning," Nami said, lying face down on her lounge chair, orange hair spilling across her shoulders. Robin hummed in agreement, adjusting her position to catch the sun's rays. Nami couldn't help stealing glances at her crewmate. The archaeologist's curvaceous form and enigmatic smile had become more pronounced since their Skypia adventure. Gone was the guarded woman who'd first joined their crew. Nami suddenly groaned, face contorting as she tried to shift positions. Robin's blue eyes snapped toward her. "Navigator? Are you injured?" "Just sore. Everywhere," Nami mumbled into the chair. "Luffy's training from hell has left me completely wrecked." "Perhaps I can assist," Robin offered, her voice dropping to a seductive purr that sent an unexpected shiver down Nami's spine. "Where does it hurt most?" "My upper back is killing me," Nami admitted, reaching awkwardly over her shoulder. "Right between my shoulder blades feels like it's been tied in knots." A mysterious smile curved Robin's full lips. "My Hana no mi makes me exceptionally qualified for massage therapy." She rose gracefully, her naked body moving with fluid elegance as she approached Nami's chair. "May I?" "God, yes," Nami moaned, not caring how desperate she sounded. Robin knelt beside the lounge chair, her hands hovering above Nami's freckled back. "Relax, navigator." "Ah!" Nami gasped as 4 hands, Robin's natural pair +2 that bloomed directly from the deck, began working her tense muscles. "Oh my god." Robin's fingers dug expertly into the knots, finding every point of tension with uncanny precision. "Your muscles are quite tight," she murmured, pressing her thumbs along Nami's spine. "MMMHMMM," was all Nami could manage, her body melting under Robin's touch. As the massage continued, something shifted in the air between them. Robin's hands moved lower, working the small of Nami's back, then gliding briefly, teasingly, over the swell of her ass. Nami felt her breath catch, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun spreading through her core. "Is this acceptable?" Robin asked, her voice husky as her hands kneaded the firm muscles of Nami's thighs. "Don't stop," Nami whispered, parting her legs slightly, an invitation she hadn't consciously decided to extend. Robin noticed Nami's glistening folds, already slick with arousal. My, she murmured appreciatively. "It seems this massage is having additional benefits." Nami couldn't deny it, her hips subtly pressing into the chair, seeking friction. "Navigator," Robin's voice was silky smooth, "would you like me to touch you elsewhere?" Nami turned her head, meeting Robin's intense gaze. "Yes," she breathed. "Please, Robin." With a whispered dos fleur, 2 more hands sprouted from the deck near Nami's lounge chair. One caressed her inner thigh while the other traced light circles up toward her center. "Ah!" Nami cried out as skilled fingers finally brushed against her swollen clit. "You're so wet," Robin observed, her own breathing quickening, so responsive. "It's amazing," Nami gasped as fingers circled her entrance teasingly. Robin leaned closer, her breasts brushing against Nami's side. "Have you ever been with a woman before?" "And no," Nami admitted, her hips now openly rocking against Robin's magical touch. "Then allow me to educate you," Robin purred, slipping a finger inside Nami's dripping cunt. "Oh, you're so tight." "Phewick," Nami groaned, spreading her legs wider. Robin's natural hands continued massaging Nami's back while her devil fruit powers created hands that worked between Nami's thighs. One hand focused on her clit, rubbing in tight circles, while another pumped 2 fingers in and out of her soaking entrance. "I've noticed how you look at our captain," Robin whispered, her lips brushing Nami's ear. "I've seen his eyes linger on you too, and on me." "You want Luffy?" Nami managed between gasps. "Just as you do," Robin confirmed, curling her fingers to hit that perfect spot inside Nami. "And I've seen how he's changed. Grown stronger, more commanding." The thought of Luffy, his intense training sessions, the authority in his voice, his rippling muscles, combined with Robin's skillful fingers sent Nami hurtling toward orgasm. "Oh God, Robin, I'm gonna. Come for me, Navigator," Robin commanded, increasing her pace. "Ah!" Nami's back arched as pleasure exploded through her body, her juices coating Robin's fingers as she bucked and shuddered. As Nami collapsed, panting, Robin smoothly repositioned herself, turning Nami onto her back. Before Nami could recover, Robin straddled her face, her own arousal evident in the glistening folds hovering above Nami's lips. "My turn," Robin stated simply, lowering herself. Nami didn't hesitate, grabbing Robin's thighs and pulling her down to her eager mouth. She might lack experience, but she made up for it with enthusiasm, lapping hungrily at Robin's. "Yes," Robin hissed, grinding against Nami's tongue, "just like that." Robin's hands, both natural and manifested, roamed over both their bodies as she rode Nami's face. One pair massaged Nami's ample breasts, pinching and rolling her nipples, while another returned to the navigator's still sensitive clit. "MMMPH," Nami moaned into Robin's, the vibrations making the older woman shudder. "Such a quick learner," Robin praised, her typically composed voice now ragged with desire. "Suck my clit, yes." Nami followed instructions perfectly, sucking the swollen bud between her lips while her tongue flicked rapidly across it. Meanwhile, Robin's fingers had resumed their delicious invasion of Nami's, driving her toward a second climax. "I'm close," Robin gasped, her thighs trembling around Nami's head. "Don't stop." Nami doubled her efforts, her tongue working furiously as Robin's movements became erratic. With a strangled cry, Robin came, grinding hard against Nami's mouth, her release flooding Nami's tongue with tangy sweetness. The sight, sound, and taste of Robin's orgasm triggered Nami's second climax, her body convulsing under Robin's magical touch. As they lay together afterward, limbs entangled and skin glistening with sweat, Robin traced lazy patterns on Nami's stomach. "Perhaps," Robin mused, "when the men return, we should see if our captain would like to join us." Nami's exhausted expression transformed into a mischievous grin. "After all that training, I think he deserves a reward, don't you?" Robin's answering smile was pure wickedness. "Indeed, and I suspect his stamina might be quite impressive." Night. The ship creaked gently against the night waves as Nico Robin stood outside the captain's quarters, heart pounding beneath her carefully chosen attire. She'd selected a deep violet dress that hugged her curves perfectly, the neckline dipping just ling without seeming desperate. Her raven hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, freshly brushed and scented with jasmine oil. Robin wasn't typically someone who fussed over appearances, but tonight was different. Tonight, she would finally be alone with him. Nami had arranged everything, insisting that Robin deserved a private first encounter with their captain. "Your first night should be special," the navigator had whispered with a knowing wink. "Trust me, you'll thank me later." As Robin raised her hand to knock, she paused, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Since Skypia, something had changed between her and Luffy. The way he smiled at her, the way he made her feel special. "Come in, Robin." His voice penetrated the wooden door before her knuckles could connect. Taking a steadying breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Luffy sat on the edge of his bed, simple red vest open to reveal the sculpted torso underneath, a result of endless battles and recent intense training. When she entered, he rose to his feet, dark eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Nami told me that you wished to join me," he said, his typically boisterous voice replaced by something lower, huskier. The transformation sent a shiver down Robin's spine, heat pooling between her thighs. "Yes," she replied, her own voice sultry and confident despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She offered him a deliberate wink, pleased when his eyes darkened further. In 3 quick strides, he closed the distance between them. Instead of going straight for her lips as she expected, Luffy leaned in and pressed his mouth against her jawline. A soft moan escaped her as his calloused hand slid down her back, cupping her ass through the thin fabric of her dress. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" he murmured against her skin, still avoiding her lips in a display of restraint she hadn't anticipated from the usually impulsive captain. "Yes," Robin answered, her voice unwavering. She tangled her fingers in his unruly black hair and pulled his face to hers, closing the final gap between them. The kiss ignited something within her. His lips were surprisingly soft, contrasting with the firm press of his body against hers. Robin moaned into his mouth as his hands found her breasts, kneading them through her dress with just the right amount of pressure. Breaking the kiss, she traced her lips along the sharp line of his jaw, but her mind was already racing ahead, wanting more. A devilish thought occurred to her. "Dos fleur," she whispered, crossing her arms in her signature pose. Beside them, arms sprouted from the floor, blossoming upward until they formed a complete duplicate of Robin herself. Luffy's eyes widened momentarily before a grin spread across his face. "That's a creative use of your powers," he chuckled. The original Robin sank to her knees before him, fingers working deftly at the fastenings of his shorts while her clone captured his mouth in another hungry kiss. When she freed his cock from its confines, Robin couldn't suppress her gasp of appreciation. "Wow!" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Do you like what you see?" Luffy teased, his voice ragged as her clone nibbled at his ear. "Yes," Robin admitted, her voice dripping with desire. Without further hesitation, she wrapped her lips around the head of his rapidly hardening length. Her academic mind had researched human sexuality extensively, but knowledge and experience were entirely different animals. The weight of him on her tongue, the salty sweet taste, the way his breathing changed when she swirled her tongue just so, these were discoveries that no book could prepare her for. "Oh, this feels perfect," Luffy groaned as she hummed around him, the vibrations making him twitch against the roof of her mouth. Robin lost herself in the rhythm, bobbing her head and taking him deeper with each movement. She felt his fingers thread through her dark hair, gently at first, then with increasing pressure as his control slipped. Suddenly, he thrust forward, pushing deep into her throat. She gagged momentarily, surprised by the intrusion, but quickly relaxed her muscles, adapting to accommodate him. The tight squeeze of her throat around him drew a guttural moan from Luffy. "You're really good at sucking cock, Robin," her clone purred, stepping behind her. Clone Robin placed her hands on original Robin's head, guiding her movements with firm pressure. Robin hadn't anticipated how arousing it would be to have her own hands controlling her, forcing her to take Luffy deeper than she might have dared on her own. Her clone pushed her head down until her nose pressed against Luffy's abdomen, holding her there as she struggled for air through her nose. Just when her lungs began to burn, her clone yanked her head back, leaving only the tip between her lips. Robin gasped, saliva connecting her swollen lips to his glistening cock in thin strands. Again, Clone Robin commanded, shoving her forward once more. The pattern continued, deep, lingering pressure followed by brief moments of recovery, until Robin's jaw ached and her eyes watered. Yet with each rough thrust, the ache between her thighs intensified. Who knew she would find such pleasure in being used this way? "I'm close," Luffy warned, his voice strained. Clone Robin responded by forcing original Robin's face to the base of his cock just as he erupted, sending thick spurts of directly down her throat. Robin swallowed eagerly, her throat working to claim every drop as he continued to pulse against her tongue. When he finally finished, Clone Robin gently lifted Robin's face, allowing his softening length to slip from between her lips with an audible pop. "You look absolutely stunning," Clone Robin whispered before capturing her mouth in a tender kiss, tasting Luffy's essence on her tongue. Robin moaned softly into the kiss, sharing the intimate flavor between them. Once they broke apart, Luffy helped Robin to her feet. Her legs felt unsteady, mind hazy with arousal. The experience had been more intense than she'd anticipated, but she regretted nothing. The way her clone had used her mouth had awakened something in her. A desire to be dominated that she'd never acknowledged before. Luffy kissed her again, deeply, seemingly untroubled by where her mouth had just been. As they kissed, Clone Robin positioned herself on the bed, spreading her legs to reveal her glistening folds. When Luffy pulled away, his eyes were dark with renewed hunger. "Now, be a good girl, and serve your clone," he commanded, his thumb caressing her cheek tenderly despite the authority in his voice. Robin wasted no time, crawling onto the bed and positioning herself between her clone's spread thighs. She pressed her face against the slick flesh, giving one long, experimental lick that made Clone Robin shudder. Emboldened by the response, Robin plunged her tongue deeper, exploring every fold and crevice with scholarly precision. As she worked, Robin arched her back deliberately, presenting her own dripping center to Luffy in silent invitation. He accepted immediately, positioning himself behind her and gripping her hips with strong hands. In one powerful motion, Luffy thrust deep inside her, filling her completely. "Oh, fuck me, Luffy. Like you fuck your whores?" The words escaped Robin's lips before she could censor them, shocking even herself with their vulgarity. Yet they felt right, perfect for the moment. Luffy responded by tightening his grip on her hips, driving into her with increasing force. Each thrust pushed Robin's face deeper into her clones, creating a rhythm of giving and receiving pleasure that threatened to overwhelm her senses. "Do you like me fucking you from behind, Robin?" Luffy growled, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of her thighs as he pounded into her relentlessly. Robin tried to answer, but her cries were muffled against Clone Robin's center. The dual sensations, Luffy's thick cock stretching her perfectly while her clone's essence flooded her mouth, ward the edge. Yes, she finally managed to shriek as her orgasm crashed over her, her inner walls clamping down on Luffy's length. Fuck. Her body convulsed with pleasure, knees threatening to give out beneath her. Before she could collapse, Luffy pulled out and flipped her onto her back in one fluid motion. He re-entered her immediately, his pace never faltering. Clone Robin seized the opportunity to straddle Robin's face, grinding her slick folds against her eager mouth. Robin devoured her hungrily, her tongue darting out to taste herself on her clone's flesh. Meanwhile, Luffy's hands found Robin's breasts, kneading the soft mounds and pinching her sensitive nipples. Each touch sent new waves of pleasure cascading through her already overstimulated body. As Robin neared another climax, Clone Robin climbed off her face, allowing her to breathe deeply. The clone then traced a path of kisses down Robin's body, pausing to lavish attention on her breasts. The sensation of her own lips and tongue on her nipples was surreal yet exquisite. "Don't stop, this feels so good," Robin whimpered as Clone Robin continued downward, eventually reaching the place where she and Luffy were joined. "Oh, yes," Robin cried out as her clone's tongue found her sensitive bud, circling it expertly while Luffy continued to thrust inside her. The combined stimulation was too much. Robin felt herself shattering once more, her inner muscles clenching rhythmically around Luffy's cock. The sensation triggered his own release, and with a final powerful thrust, he emptied himself deep inside her. Luffy groaned, his hips jerking as he filled her with his seed. As he slowly withdrew, Clone Robin eagerly moved between Robin's legs, lapping at the mixture of their combined essence. The sight was so erotic that Robin felt herself trembling with aftershocks of pleasure. "That was amazing," Robin sighed, her body boneless with satisfaction. Robin reached for Luffy, pulling him down beside her. Her clone dispelled in a shower of petals, leaving just the two of them entwined in the captain's quarters as the ship continued its journey through the night. While Luffy and Robin were having fun, the dimly lit cabin of the Thousand Sunny echoed with desperate moans and the clink of seastone restraints. Three women writhed helplessly on the wooden floor, their bodies glistening with sweat as dozens of disembodied hands worked them into a frenzy of pleasure without release. A Nico Robin clone sat cross-legged in the center of the room, arms crossed in her signature stance, eyes closed in concentration. Three identical versions of herself, created through her Hana no Mi powers, stood watch over each captive, their azure eyes glinting with cruel amusement. Please," Nami gasped, her copper hair plastered to her forehead as she thrashed against her bonds. "I can't take anymore." The archaeologist's powers had evolved to terrifying new heights. No longer limited to sprouting simple arms and hands, Robin could now manifest hands with specialized appendages, including mouths and tongues that moved with devious precision. 3 such hands hovered over Nami's heaving chest, each palm bearing a wet, writhing tongue that lapped hungrily at her sensitive nipples. The navigator's back arched involuntarily, her body betraying her even as her mind screamed for relief. Navigator, the nearest Robin clone purred, kneeling to observe Nami's tortured expression. Your tolerance seems to be improving. Perhaps we should intensify things? No, Nami wailed, but her protest dissolved into a strangled moan as 3 more hands materialized between her thighs, their tongued palms exploring her most intimate areas. Nearby, Princess Vivi of Alabasta pulled frantically at her seastone cuffs, her royal composure utterly shattered. Her blue hair hung in sweaty tangles around her flushed face as disembodied hands teased and tormented every sensitive part of her trembling body. Robin, this is madness. Vivi cried out, her voice breaking as a particularly clever tongue found a spot that made her vision blur. Madness? No, Princess, the Robin clone assigned to her whispered, leaning close enough that her breath tickled Vivi's ear. This is education. On the other side of the room, Nijiko, Nami's adoptive sister, had given up struggling entirely. Her tanned, tattooed body quivered helplessly as Robin's hands worked their magic, bringing her repeatedly to the edge of climax before cruelly withdrawing. You're all so beautiful when you're desperate, the 3rd Robin clone observed, circling Nijiko's prone form like a predator. The way your body's tense, the sounds you make when denied. Please, no more, Nami suddenly screamed, her voice raw with frustration as she was denied release for what felt like the 100th time. The 4 Robin clones exchanged knowing glances. After a moment, they nodded in unison. The clone nearest Nami knelt until they were face to face, capturing the navigator's lips in a searing kiss. Nami moaned into Robin's mouth, her resistance melting away as the archaeologist's skilled tongue danced around hers. Without warning, Robin's tongue began to elongate, another evolution of her frightening powers, sliding deeper into Nami's mouth until it pushed past the back of her throat. Nami's eyes widened in shock, a muffled gagging sound escaping her as the muscular appendage pulsed and writhed, fucking her throat with deliberate, rhythmic motions. Simultaneously, similar tongued hands invaded Nami's other openings, stretching and filling her completely. 2 more hands latched onto her nipples, the wet tongues in their palms circling and flicking the sensitive buds until they stood painfully erect. MMMPHH, MMMPH. Nami's screams were effectively silenced by the tongue down her throat, her body convulsing in a mixture of shock and overwhelming pleasure. 2 additional hands materialized behind her, their tongued palms lavishing attention on the curves of her ass, occasionally delivering playful, stinging slaps that left red handprints on her flesh. Nami's consciousness began to fragment under the assault. Every nerve ending in her body fired simultaneously, creating a tsunami of sensation that threatened to drown her. This time, as the pressure built inside her, Robin didn't withdraw. Instead, the tempo increased, the tongues working in perfect coordination to drive her higher and higher. Oh, Robin! Nami managed to cry out when the tongue briefly withdrew from her throat, allowing her a gasping breath before plunging back in. The pressure built to unbearable heights, her muscles clenching, toes curling, back arching off the wooden floor. And then, finally, the dam broke. Ah! Yes! The scream that tore from Nami's throat as the tongue withdrew was primal, her entire body convulsing in waves of pleasure so intense they bordered on pain. Her vision whited out as the orgasm ripped through her, leaving her boneless and gasping. When awareness slowly returned, Nami found herself trembling on the floor, her body covered in a sheen of sweat, muscles occasionally twitching with aftershocks. Nearby, Vivi and Nijiko appeared equally devastated, their chests heaving as they recovered from similar treatment. You are sadistic, Robin. Nami panted. Somewhat little strength remained to lift her head and meet the clone's amused gaze. The Robin clone's lips curved into a wicked smile, a rare expression for the normally composed archaeologist, and all the more terrifying for its rarity. It was a smile that promised both pleasure and pain in equal measure. A smile that sent shivers down Nami's spine even as her exhausted body responded with a fresh pulse of desire. Who said we are done here? Robin asked, her voice silky and dangerous. With a gesture, dozens of fresh hands bloomed across the floor, crawling like spiders toward the three captive women. Nami's eyes widened in equal parts fear and anticipation. Despite her exhaustion, she felt her body respond in another round of exquisite torture. It was going to be a very long night indeed. After spending 3 months on that island, the crew felt much stronger, but Nami knew that Luffy wasn't yet satisfied with his own strength. She couldn't really blame him. She had heard him say that as long as he wasn't at least as strong as an admiral, then he wouldn't be able to protect them. I know there are people stronger than admirals, but being as strong as one is my goal right now. When it comes to strength, then I will surpass them. I will become stronger. My dreams and strong will are not enough to become the Pirate King. I need strength, and that can only be achieved with training and fighting stronger and stronger opponents. After leaving the island, the problems arose once again for them in the form of going merry. They knew even before going to Skypia that their ship wasn't in good condition, but now, it was clear the ship had seen better days. As they were sailing, water trickled inside through a small crack in the storage room, which needed to be sealed immediately. The second problem came when a part of the wooden railings around the deck started cracking, followed by a chunk of it falling into the sea below. Usopp had even reported that the crow's nest had started falling apart, with the floor creaking loudly every time he climbed it. Nami wasn't sure if Luffy wanted to fix the ship or get a new one. The ship wasn't sailing as fast as it used to, and the one who seemed the most distressed about this was clearly Usopp. Even now, he was checking every part of the ship, trying to see if there was anything he could fix. As Usopp was busy checking on the ship with his hammer, Sanji invited everyone to eat breakfast. They walked inside, with Luffy starting first. He often stole food from the other plates, but the girls didn't have to worry, he never took from theirs. "Hey, I just remembered something. We have a lot of gold now. We can use that gold to fix the ship." Usopp exclaimed with a growing smile as Luffy stealthily stole the piece of steak from his plate while Chopper jumped up and down on his chair from happiness. "Hey!" Usopp shouted in protest before trying to grab the piece of steak from Luffy's mouth, only for the latter to swallow it and then burp right at Usopp's face, whose face turned a little green. "That's disgusting," Usopp exclaimed before grabbing Luffy's drink and then drinking it right at his face. "Hey!" Luffy shouted comically as he started exchanging punches with Usopp and was soon joined by Chopper. Sanji shook his head in disbelief. It was a big mystery how their captain could go from serious and deadly to a goofy pirate who no one could take seriously. "Is this really our captain?" Nami questioned in slight disbelief but with a warm smile on her lips as she watched Negico join in the exchanges of blows. "Not fair, Negico. Give me back my drink. Stop it. Don't hit him there. It will take a while to heal. I will drown all three of you right now. Try it. I can just use my air orb to fly away. Hehehehe." She still remembered the serious Luffy back at Skypia. She much preferred this version of her captain rather than the one who always felt guilty. She knew the wounds weren't closed yet. Her eyes often glanced down at the wound on her belly where Akainu's fist had made contact with her. Her armor had saved her life that night. Without it, she would have died at that moment. Robin still had scars on her arms because of Akainu. But the scars reminded her that this world is not forgiving. They needed to get stronger and fast. Otherwise, they all would lose. Eventually, the bickering between them ended. The three of them were soaked in water, and Negico walked away smiling innocently. Their captain quickly sent a gentle breeze towards him, drying himself right away while Usopp and Chopper were left soaked. Luffy grinned widely when Sanji brought him more food to eat. "What a pig," Sanji murmured under his breath as their captain bit half of the steak and swallowed it right away. Sanji shook his head before noticing that Zoro had raised his hand. "What the hell do you want, Moss Head?" Sanji asked with a huff, glaring at the swordsman who glared back at him. "More food," Zoro answered casually, pointing at his now empty plate. "Prepare your own food, Moss Head. But knowing your sense of direction, you will end up eating your own legs." "What was that?" Zoro shouted, standing up and banging his forehead against Sanji, who pushed against him. The cigarette between his lips burned out quickly, turning to ash. "You heard, Moss Head, or do you have problems with hearing now too?" Sanji shouted, ready to kick the idiot. "Boys, enough. Do this later." Nami ordered them with a scolding look, looking away from her own food. "Yes, my dear Nami," Sanji exclaimed. bowing his head to her as if she was a princess, while Zoro murmured something about witches or something. After 10 more minutes, everyone ate their breakfast. At that moment, Luffy decided this was a good moment to address his crew. "Alright. Nami, how much gold did we take from Skypia?" he asked as he cleared his throat, his voice changing from goofy to serious, almost like flipping a switch. "Oh, well, with how much we collected during our journey, and how much we took from Skypia. I can't know for sure until we find a place to exchange the gold with berries, but I would say we should have around 400 million berry on our hands," Nami exclaimed with a greedy smile, her eyes turning into berry signs along with a cash register sound, earning a chuckle from Luffy. "Holy crap. 400 million berry," Usopp shouted in disbelief, the fork with a piece of steak slipping off his fingers while Chopper's mouth fell on the floor. "Luffy, can I get to keep 80%? Pretty pleasey?" Nami pleaded with her best puppy eyes while leaning over the table, showing quite a lot of her cleavage, her breasts almost spilling out of her bra. "Greedy witch," Zoro murmured under his breath with a scoff. "Nami, my love, you can have all my money," Sanji squealed with heart eyes, looking at her cleavage and leaning closer, but he was slapped away by Nami's right golden wing. The same wing quickly sank back inside her back while Luffy burst out laughing. "Nope," Luffy answered the moment he was done laughing, earning a loud, cute pout from Nami. "Perhaps next time," Luffy promised with a wink, his eyes lingering on her cleavage for a few moments before looking back up at her orange eyes. "Now, what should we do with 400 million berries?" Luffy pondered deeply before looking back at Nami. "Alright, with that money, we will resupply everything we need. That includes our medical supplies, but as you all have already figured out, Going Merry is in a terrible condition. We need to find a shipwright, but fixing Going Merry is not all we need to do," Luffy informed them, grabbing everyone's attention, especially Usopp's. "Huh? What do you mean?" Usopp asked with a slight edge in his voice. "We should face the truth. Going Merry is a very small ship and nowhere near strong enough to be our ship. We are a crew of 9 people with only a few rooms left. It's been 5 months since we got this ship, and it is already falling apart. We need— Are you saying we should abandon Merry?" With a slam of his hands on the table, Usopp rose to his legs and shouted angrily, glaring down at Luffy, the chair being knocked over. The sound hung in the air for a few moments. Silence fell over the entire room, and Nami gulped slightly, knowing Usopp had just disrespected their captain in front of everyone. Vivi looked away, while Robin, Sanji, Zoro, and Negico had blank looks on their faces, but one could notice the way Negico's eyes were twitching. Chopper decided to hide behind one of the table's legs. He could tell Luffy was angry, his lips twitching in a way that scared him. "Usopp," Luffy said the name as if Usopp was suddenly a stranger. Luffy slowly rose to his feet, before turning to face Usopp, his eyes hidden by his straw hat. Usopp seemed to have realized his mistake and opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, but Luffy uttered another word. "I'm the captain of this crew, Usopp, and of this ship. I told you this once when we met with Cricket and the Monkey Brothers. I told you to not speak out of turn." Luffy spoke with suppressed anger in his every word as he glared furiously at the long-nosed crewmate whose face had turned white like milk. "Luffy. Quite Nami." Luffy quickly silenced her without even looking at her. His eyes remained on Usopp, who gulped loudly. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Luffy demanded, sending a wave of Conqueror's haki that turned Usopp's legs wobbly. "I'm sorry. I don't know what took over me. I'm sorry, Captain," Usopp apologized sincerely, bowing his head. This was the first time Usopp had addressed Luffy as Captain. Luffy looked down at him for a moment, silent and pondering deeply, before answering. His voice remained cold. "Make sure this doesn't happen again, Usopp. I mean it," Luffy stated with a tone that made it clear that he wasn't playing around. The wave of anxiety slowly faded away as Luffy turned to address Nami once again. "Alright, as I was saying, this ship needs a good upgrade. I know none of you have been in the New World, nor have I. But Ace has sent me quite a few letters describing his adventures there. Moby is the main ship of Whitebeard, and even that ship has difficulties sailing such waters. We need to upgrade this ship to withstand such a place, or we need to buy an entirely new ship. If we fix this ship and nothing else, It will sink the moment we get into the new world." Luffy informed everyone with a grave voice. The others nodded in understanding. Luffy then walked out of the room, not sparing Usopp a look. Once the door closed, the rest of the crew gave him looks, but none of them said anything before walking outside. Luffy and Usopp rarely talked with one another after the incident. Even after 2 days of sailing, their next destination ended up being just another plain-looking island. As they were preparing to explore the island, they all heard the sound of people cheering. They all turned their heads to see a ship sailing towards them. The ship was red and twice the size of Moby. "What the?" Nami's words trailed off as a strange man appeared on the main deck of the new ship sailing towards them, seemingly unbothered by the sight of the pirates. "Foxy, Foxy. My name is Foxy. The captain of this ship," the man exclaimed with a wide grin that was starting to annoy Luffy. Foxy is a tall, albeit stout, man with skinny arms and legs. He has an almost mouth and a unique hairstyle, with his hair split into 2 spikes pointing upwards. He has thick, triangular eyebrows and is grinning like a moron. His nose is also colored red and long, just like Usopp. Foxy was wearing yellow-orange pants, held up by suspenders, with large, rotund buckles on the edges, tucked inside black boots, which are white on the front part of the legs and have orange strings. He has an elaborate necklace hanging on his chest, with many circular orange and yellow pendants, and a blue, bigger and more elaborate central one, with ears resembling those of a fox. He also sports a fur-lined coat with a large collar and big buttons on the right side. "Who are these guys?" Usopp asked dumbfounded, with a finger across his chin. "A bunch of weirdos. Should we deal with them?" Zoro questioned, looking over at Luffy, whose whole attention seemed to be on the approaching ship. "For now, only keep your guard up." They all heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Foxy was soon joined by a woman who held posters in her hands. She had a nasty grin and looked at the poster before looking down at Luffy. "Monkey D. Luffy, 356 million berries," she said with a growing smile. "Roronoa Zoro, 199 million berries." The woman went on and announced the bounties of everyone in the Straw Hat Pirates, looking at each one as she said their names out loud for everyone to hear. "We already know our own bounties. What do you all want? Are you here for our bounties?" Luffy asked, sounding bored, his index finger emitting electricity. "Collected your bounties. Nah. That would be a waste. We, the Foxy Pirates, challenge you and your crew to an official Davy-back fight," Foxy exclaimed with the same wide grin as he burst out laughing. Luffy arched an eyebrow before turning to face his crew. Many of them still appeared confused, except for Usopp. "What the hell is Davy-back fight, Usopp?" "EHH. If I remember correctly, we will have to fight them in certain unique challenges, and if they win, we will become a part of their crew with force," Usopp explained, scratching the top of his head and earning a groan from Zoro while Foxy laughed even more. "Did you hear that, Straw Hat Luffy? Now do you accept the Chale-ah?" The Straw Hat Pirates watched blankly as the entire enemy crew was hit by a massive bolt of white lightning, illuminating the entire ship. Once it was over, the ship was as silent as a grave. All heard were the small waves crashing against the unmoving ship. Did you just killed them?" Usopp stammered, paling slightly as Luffy shook his head. "No, they are still alive, but will suffer quite a lot of burns. Nami, Nijiko and Robin. Take everything valuable from their ship. We are leaving." "You are the best captain," Nami exclaimed greedily with berry eyes as she kissed Luffy on the lips before flying over to the other enemy ship. Luffy chuckled slightly, watching Nami use her devil fruit to form a golden rope bridge that connected the 2 ships so the others could join them. 1 week later, after stealing everything from the Foxy Pirates, which wasn't much, only 30 million berries, they sailed once again, hoping to find another island, and maybe this one would be more exciting. Soon, they reached an island. This one had a jungle, but as they were sailing towards it, they noticed snow. Why is it snowing?" Chopper exclaimed as he looked up at the snow falling from above. Yet the air still felt much warmer than it should have since it was snowing. "Not just the snow. The water of the ocean is freezing," Usopp shouted for everyone to hear. They all looked around the ship, and he was right. They all stared in silence as the ship was frozen in place, just 5 meters away from reaching the docks, the ice glittering with the sunlight reflecting on it. This must be a devil fruit user, Nijiko speculated, remembering the way the entire island had started burning when Akainu had arrived. Who can be this strong? Nami wondered out loud as Luffy jumped from the main deck. We cannot go anywhere right now. Let's see who is doing this. Luffy ordered them as he took a deep breath before letting it out, his breathing becoming more visible as time passed. Luffy could feel this person with his observation haki as they got closer. Wait, who is this guy? I feel someone powerful nearby. Usopp shouted, a little staggered as they got closer. Soon followed by Robin, Sanji, Zoro, Nami, Nijiko, Chopper, and Vivi. After passing through the jungle, the Straw Hats entered an open space area. The crew was alert and kept pace with Luffy, who slowed his steps and raised a hand to stop them. A tall man was sleeping while standing beside a rock, leaning on it, and he was snoozing. Who the hell is this? Robin fell to the ground, and her eyes grew in terror. She knew this feeling. This feeling was really bad. Nami gasped at seeing Robin like that, and Vivi tried to help Robin get back on her feet. Oi, what's wrong? Zoro asked, not looking away from the guy. A man with that haki is a real danger whether he's sleeping or not. Robin was breathing irregularly. Marine Admiral Aokiji, Robin said with terror in her voice. Admiral, PHFMM. Is it already morning? Aokiji spoke and placed his sleeping mask on his forehead. No way. Nami's wings formed behind her back right away, along with 10 fireballs above her wings. He looked at the group before him. Oh, it's you Straw Hats. I've been waiting a long time, so I kind of slept. He said, still of his head. And I can see you were all present. Good. Even you Nico Robin. Aokiji sat down Indian style. The Straw Hats saw Robin in the worst condition ever. She looked petrified. Luffy kept patient and sighed. Why are you here, Aokiji? It's a long way from HQ. The Admiral laughed, looking down at Garp's grandson. The man of the hour, Monkey D. Luffy. Tell me, how are you feeling with the bounty 376 million, so successful in the Grand Line? Aokiji didn't wait for Luffy to answer as his gaze fell on Nico Robin. So this is the next crew you are using, Nico Robin? Aokiji said arrogantly and almost spat those words. Hey, don't talk that way to her, damn Marine. Sanji threw his cigarette and pointed at him. Yeah, Robin is with us and will never do such thing. Chopper stood up for her. Ha, so naive to the truth. Listen. She has survived for one hell of a long time. Through her life she has joined lots of pirate crews, criminal organizations, and the such. But now is here with you all? He pointed his finger at her. Now, do you wonder what happened to all the previous crews she was in? Gone. Every single one of them was killed or arrested. Do you wonder why, in every instance, she has been able to run away? He questioned the Straw Hats. None could answer, but a firm stomp got the Admiral's attention. Luffy broke the trance of guilt for Robin. Enough. That does not matter. I invited her in and she accepted. She's my crewmate, and I don't care about her past. He firmly told the Admiral, glaring at him. Robin was grateful to her captain's assurance to protect her name. She also felt guilty at the same time. What are you here for then, Admiral? Nami asked, now sharing the hate of her team. He grunted and popped his neck. Simple, he pointed to them. I'm here to eliminate all of you. Is that so? Luffy questioned as a wind snake slowly formed around his shoulder with bright red eyes. Monkey D. Luffy, if you give up now, I will let you all leave this place. I'm here only for Nico Robin. Aokiji offered, but he quickly noticed the furious glare in Luffy's eyes. I don't sell my crewmates. Before disappearing from Aokiji's view, the speed caught Aokiji off guard as Luffy appeared before him and quickly punched him in the face, sending him flying before smashing against the big rock. As the dust cloud cleared away, Aokiji walked away from the rubble with a shocked expression as he wiped something from his chin, only to see blood on his palm. He slowly looked up at Luffy, who was marching towards him. Now, 2 wind snakes were hovering over his shoulders, one with red eyes and one with green eyes. I see I have to take this seriously. Pirate. My grandson is going to get himself killed. Garp's annoying voice was heard as Kuzan escaped his thoughts and turned to look at the old man. Huh? Luffy, he keeps telling him how he is going to become the king of the pirates, and I don't know what to do. Same for that moron Ace. He is just like Luffy, but dumber somehow. Garp complained more before throwing a biscuit in his mouth. Kuzan wondered what brought this up. He didn't really know much about Garp's family, but he knew he had one grandson. Kuzan had known Garp for many years, since the days he started training him, and in a way, he believed in Garp's sense of justice. But only now he realized that while he knew Garp, he had no idea what Garp was like with his family. Why don't you just change his mind with your fists? I thought you fixed all your problems with them. One good hit, and it should do the job. Kuzan questioned as he leaned back until his back touched the wooden railing of the ship. 10 years ago, he wouldn't have dared to do something like this. One slipped up, and he would have fallen and drowned, but since he mastered frozen touch, Kuzan wasn't as concerned about drowning anymore. Garp seemed deep in thought before shaking his head. While I like to act like my fists can change anything and convince people to do what I want, I know from experience that when someone's mind is dead set on something, no matter how hard you hit, it is not going to change anything. At that point, the only thing you can do is support them, whatever is right or wrong, Garp said grimly. Kuzan wondered if Garp was speaking from experience. He wondered if there was someone Garp had tried to convince with his fists, but the end result wasn't what he had wanted. Your grandson is what, 9, 10 years old? 14. Garp corrected him, and Kuzan arched an eyebrow at that. Who knew time could fly like this? Sometimes, he needed to remind himself that 19 years had passed since Nico Robin. Well, he's still a brat. I'm sure you can convince him. Maybe you can try to change his mind with what is taught in the Navy. Maybe you can. I have tried everything, Kuzan. It is not going to work. If 100 punches didn't convince him, then nothing will. Garp interrupted him before letting out a resigned sigh. So why are you telling me this? Your grandson wants to be a criminal, so what? Let him do what he wants. From my experience, sooner or later, he will bite more than he can chew, and when that day comes, if he survives, he will crawl back to you and beg for your forgiveness. Kuzan said dismissively. He knew it was hard for some people to hear it, but family or not, some people were born to be one thing. Maybe, but Kuzan, I want to ask you for a favor. Garp's voice changed, no longer casual but a more serious one, and Kuzan already had an idea of what he wanted from him. What favor? What are you here for then, Admiral? Nami asked, now sharing the hate of her team. He grunted and popped his neck. Simple, he pointed to them, I'm here to eliminate all of you. Is that so? Luffy asked as a wind snake with bright red eyes slowly formed around his shoulder. Monkey D. Luffy, if you give up now, I will let you all leave this place. I'm here only for Nico Robin. Aokiji offered, but he quickly noticed the furious glare in Luffy's eyes. I don't sell my crewmates. Before disappearing from Aokiji's view, the speed caught Aokiji off guard as Luffy appeared before him and quickly punched him in the face, sending him flying before smashing against the big rock. As the dust cloud cleared away, Aokiji walked away from the rubble with a shocked expression. He wiped something from his chin, only to see blood on his palm. He slowly looked up at Luffy, who was marching towards him. Now, 2 wind snakes were hovering over his shoulders, one with red eyes and one with green eyes. I see I have to take this seriously. Pirate. Kuzan slowly marched towards the pirate, as did Luffy towards the admiral. This wasn't Luffy's first time fighting an admiral, but he was sure that the new ability he had gained from training with his crew for 3 whole months would give him an edge in this fight. Luffy wasn't foolish enough to think that he was ready to defeat an admiral. He knew he could not win this fight, but this time, he would be different. The last time with Akainu, his crew suffered. They were injured, all of them. Luffy's mind still went back to Nami's injured belly from Akainu's punch, Robin's burned marks on her arms, and his own right arm. Sometimes, he could still feel the lava on his flesh, the smell, the pain, but Luffy would never let something like that happen again. He was the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. He would deal with his admiral by himself. Nami quickly prepared to use her Phoenix mode to attack the admiral, and Zoro prepared to fight as he unsheathed his swords, with Sanji ready to beat the crap out of this admiral when, stop. For a moment, the crew could not believe that Luffy had told them to stop. But Luffy, he's an admiral. Nami quickly reminded him with concern. She wanted to ignore his orders and fight nonetheless, but suddenly, a wave of conqueror's haki hit all of them, and it didn't come from the admiral. Zoro, I entrust you to keep them safe. Go back to the ship, and wait for me. This is an order. Luffy said as a line formed on the ground. The line reached from one side of the island to the next, splitting Luffy and Kuzan from the rest of the crew. Zoro narrowed his gaze before letting out an annoyed sigh, sheathing his swords, much to the shock of the rest of the crew. "Oi, Zoro, we have to help the captain," Usopp quickly shouted, despite the terror he was feeling. "He's right, Zoro, we should do something." Chopper quickly chimed in, but Zoro ignored them as he looked at Nami and Sanji. The two crewmates averted their eyes. Nami's phoenix form slowly faded away, and she turned back to normal while Sanji let out a puff of smoke from his mouth. Never took him for someone to run to his death, he murmured under his breath as they all followed Zoro back to going merry. "Tell me, are you really that cocky that you really think you can defeat me by yourself?" Aokiji asked with a scoff. One of the things that annoyed him the most were people with big heads who thought they were much more important and stronger than they actually were. No, Luffy's answer was short and sharp, and Kuzan arched an eyebrow at his response. He didn't expect that answer. "Oh, then, can you enlighten me on why you want to get yourself killed so badly? Is it because of Robin? Trust me, your crew will be much safer without her. You have no idea how much the world government wants her head. They won't stop until her head is on a spike somewhere, so trust me, she will drag you and your crew to the depths of hell." Kuzan answered casually, knowing it wasn't as simple as just giving them Nico Robin. Aokiji knew the world government was after Grap's grandson. He wasn't sure why, though. From what he could see, all this brat had going for was his strange devil fruit and having a D on his name. But Kuzan knew many pirates who had a D on their name who the world government wasn't hunting down like they were trying with Monkey D. Luffy. Kuzan knew not what was so important, but something on this kid had caused the higher-ups to get all itchy and want to hunt him down. "Maybe you were right," Luffy answered as the snakes hovering over his shoulders grew in size. Soon, a third one formed, wrapping itself around Luffy's waist, his silver eyes facing Kuzan. "When Akainu attacked us, after what he did to my crew, I promised myself that I would never allow them to get hurt again," Luffy said determinedly as he let go of his sandals. Now barefoot, Luffy's feet turned black with haki and swirls spread around the three wind snakes before turning black with haki. A snake-like tattoo spread from Luffy's legs, swirling itself around him, soon reaching his arms and then his face before turning black with haki. Kuzan almost on of Akainu. That man was ruthless. Kuzan wondered how this kid survived a fight against him. He had been there to see Akainu fight. He wasn't like Kizaru, who loved playing with his food. Akainu always went for the kill. But Kuzan quickly concluded that he survived only because of pure luck. Akainu wasn't one to allow criminals to escape. Even if the said criminal was his own mother, he would have still done his job. "Bring it on, pirate." Luffy disappeared from view, appearing before Kuzan with a quick move of his hand. An ice spear formed on his hand, and he quickly launched it at Luffy. Suddenly, one of the snakes opened his mouth wide. The spear sank inside the snake, and Aokiji watched as the ice spear melted completely before turning into hot steam, which the snake fired back at him. Aokiji backed away as he winced in pain. The hot steam felt painful against his skin. Luffy appeared behind him, a good kick in the neck, sending Aokiji flying, before slamming against the ground, but his entire body turned into ice before breaking apart entirely. Luffy's eyes narrowed as the entire surface started freezing. Using his observation haki, he knew where he was. Luffy quickly jumped up in the air as Aokiji suddenly burst out of the frozen ground, holding an ice spear in his hand. The spear would have stabbed right through the heart. One of Luffy's snakes suddenly launched itself towards Aokiji. The Admiral watched in confusion. The wind snakes were the same size as normal snakes, so why was Luffy? Aokiji's eyes widened in shock as the snake grew in size. Before letting out a massive wind attack, the wind sliced through Aokiji, but the wound quickly turned into ice. Ice Age, he slammed his hands on the ground, and a burst of cold spread everywhere. Even the wind snake slowly started fading away as the moisture around the air started freezing until he disappeared completely. Everything around Aokiji turned to ice, the hill nearby, the trees, and even the smallest creatures froze instantly. Luffy landed on the frozen ground, showing no fear in his eyes, two snakes still hovering over his shoulder. Aokiji merely looked at him with a narrowed gaze. "You have no chance to win," he claimed as his right hand started freezing. A set of frozen wings formed on his arm, and his hand turned into a beak. Luffy watched as a giant ice bird launched towards him. He quickly took a deep breath before releasing it towards the bird as a massive torrent of hot steam. Slowly, the bird started melting, but Luffy still had to dodge since his hot steam wasn't hot enough. Suddenly, in midair, he noticed something that made his skin crawl. It was snowing, and he watched as the snow around him quickly came together, forming a frozen Kuzan. Luffy screamed in pain as an ice spear pierced his shoulder before slamming against the frozen ground. The frozen Aokiji looked at him without emotions as the ice peeled away like eggshells, revealing the real Aokiji underneath. "You stood no chance," Aokiji said before releasing a burst of frozen air, causing Luffy to freeze entirely. Aokiji sighed, but he made sure to keep him alive. After all, he had a favor to keep. He stood up and prepared to walk towards the ship. After all, the water around the island had turned into ice, and the ship couldn't sail anywhere unless Aokiji stopped using his frozen touch to freeze the water underneath the island. They had nowhere to go. As he walked away, he noticed something. "Wait, why did this one have no snakes?" Aokiji screamed in pain as a burst of hot steam hit him from behind, causing the ground to melt, but that wasn't all as a giant wind snake slammed down on him from above with his mouth wide open. Aokiji quickly froze the air around the snake, causing it to fade away, when a burst of steam engulfed him entirely. Aokiji clenched his teeth in pain. He couldn't understand. His observation haki never failed him, so why didn't he notice that he was fighting a copy? Frozen time. The steam and everything around him froze. The birds in the sky turned into ice before falling to the ground below. The steam around him disappeared, and Luffy stood 10 meters away. His right leg was frozen, and he breathed heavily. Aokiji turned to face him, looking mildly annoyed. "How did you do that? My observation haki never fails me. So, how did you hide yourself?" Aokiji questioned with a furrowed brow, but Luffy merely laughed at him before turning serious. "Why the hell would I tell you that?" he questioned as his body started emitting steam. Aokiji watched as the ice on his legs started melting, and the final wind snake left was soon joined by 3 others. "It doesn't matter. You will lose now." "Rain of ice," he shouted, and every bit of moisture in the air suddenly turned to ice. Luffy watched as thousands of ice projectiles formed everywhere around him, and even breathing became harder. Every single one of them turned into a small knife, all pointing at Luffy. "How can you win when you can't even breathe?" Aokiji questioned as the air itself felt heavier for Luffy. He coughed and coughed. He could feel cold, real cold, but instead of showing panic, he slammed his hands on the ground once again. A burst of steam hit Aokiji, but the steam froze within seconds, and the Admiral didn't seem impressed by it. "I don't know what you are trying to do with that horse steam, but it is not going to work," Aokiji declared, before moving his fist forward. All the ice projectiles launched themselves at Luffy. His 4 snakes quickly grew in size, engulfing every bit of ice that flew towards Luffy, which soon became steam inside their throats. The snakes quickly unleashed a torrent of hot steam towards Aokiji, but a wall of ice blocked it. He watched as the ice started melting right away. With his observation haki, he quickly sidestepped as Luffy slammed his foot on the ground. "This is tiresome," Aokiji claimed as he dodged all his attacks easily. Luffy kept launching more and more hot steam, but the air and the ground made that steam freeze almost instantly. Luffy kept slamming his hand on the ground, but nothing happened. Aokiji couldn't understand what the pirate was playing at, but it was time to end this. "This game ends now," Aokiji claimed, suddenly freezing the air around Luffy, but he watched as a sphere of hot air formed around him, allowing him to breathe easily. The 3 wind snakes flew towards the Admiral, but the Admiral easily dodged as he started running towards the pirate. Aokiji moved much faster than Luffy expected. The moment his finger touched the air sphere, it turned into a thin layer of ice that broke down, allowing Aokiji to grab Luffy by his neck before lifting him up. "You have lost," Aokiji claimed as he started freezing Luffy. Then he heard a sound. Looking up, a massive wind snake opened its mouth wide open, before releasing a torrent of hot steam right at Aokiji. He screamed in pain, The skin of his arms and shoulders had turned bright red. But as he ignored the pain, he looked around for the pirate, ready to end this silly fight when he showed up right in front of him. Aokiji, without thinking, threw an ice spear that pierced Luffy right in the heart, but his body started disappearing as if he were a mirage. Aokiji's eyes widened as he whirled around. Before him stood Straw Hat Luffy. He was way too close. With his right fist drawn back, a bubble made of cold air engulfed his right hand. A new spear formed, puncturing Luffy's shoulder, but he didn't stop, screaming in rage as his punch made contact with Aokiji on the right side of his chest. For a moment, nothing happened, and Aokiji almost scoffed when Aokiji's eyes widened, and he fell to his knees. A shot of pain engulfed his body like lightning. His body burned up in pain. It felt like a burning fire consuming his organs. He opened his mouth, and a chunk of blood burst out, freezing the moment it touched the ground. Aokiji breathed heavily, but as he fell to his knees, he coughed more and more blood. He watched as Luffy fell on his back, breathing heavily, just had gone pale, but he was grinning like a maniac. What did you do? Aokiji demanded in rage. A shot of pain made him fall to the ground, coughing more blood. He didn't know what was happening to him, but the pain wasn't stopping, and as he breathed heavily, he wondered if he had truly just lost to a brat. The hot steam, Luffy said, tired, breathing heavily. I filled your lungs with hot air until I knew they were overfilled. Then my fist with cold air went inside your lungs, causing your left lung to burst. Luffy said breathlessly, causing Aokiji's eyes to widen. But as he forced himself to stand on his knees, he unbuttoned his uniform. The moment he rolled up the shirt underneath, he froze in place at the sight. The right side of his chest had black, with small red spots around the skin. Aokiji breathed heavily, knowing he needed to go to a doctor right away. This wasn't something his fruit could fix. He looked back at the pirate captain, who was still lying on the ground with his back, breathing heavily. You cannot move, can you? You breathed a lot of ice in your body when I froze the air. Aokiji asked with gritted teeth, and Luffy didn't answer. Instead, his fingers dragged on the ground, breaking his fingernails as he tried to stand up. Aokiji slowly formed an ice spear on his hand, but merely using the devil fruit caused him pain, coughing more blood. He knew he needed to leave soon. As a farewell gift, Aokiji stated, drawing his arm back before swinging his spear downwards. A burst of blood in the air, turning the spear red. Luffy's screams of pain echoed in the air. A gash ran from his shoulder blade to his rib cage. Luffy clenched his teeth in pain, but he knew this wasn't a lethal wound. If the Admiral wanted him dead, one spear to the head and he would be dead. You have earned this, Monkey D. Luffy. Someone like you, much weaker than me, and you caught me off guard like that. Hee hee hee. Garp always said you were dumb. But it seemed he underestimated you. Aokiji praised him with a chuckle, another shot of pain, and he flinched as he placed his hand on the right side of his chest. Luffy looked at him with a narrowed gaze but kept quiet despite the mention of his grandfather. I will leave you now. As for Robin, well, I still think your crew is much better off without her, but it's your crew, so do whatever you want. But one warning before I leave. Aokiji said grimly as he walked up to Luffy, still lying on the ground. Aokiji's eyes looked down at him, right at the eyes. The world government won't give up with just sending a Kainu. They have been informed that he failed to capture you. I know how they work. It didn't work the first time. The second time they will send someone else, someone stronger. Do you want my advice? I think you should sail to the New World as soon as possible. There you will be safer from the world government, but that might not work as well. After all, as you are now, you stand no chance against Big Mom and Kaido. Aokiji said grimly with a blank look before turning on his heels and walking away. Until next time, Monkey D. Luffy, ta-ta, somewhere. Yamato hadn't opened her eyes that morning expecting her life to tilt on its axis. But as dusk bled across the sky, fire and fury rode in on the sea. Pirates, brash and barely grown, pulsing with heat and defiance. No Kaido in sight. That mattered. It meant Yamato didn't have to hold back. She clashed with their leader head-on. Watched him shatter the prison cages where trembling children waited. Watched him crush the monstrous effigy that loomed over Onigashima's gates. A dragon carved in her father's image, cold and tyrannical. Her kanabo cracked the stone throat. It felt like something tore inside her chest. A tether, unseen but strangling for years. As if the air rushed back into her lungs for the first time in forever. Weightless. Like the lanterns drifting through the skies during the fire festival, paper vessels filled with flame and prayers, rising silently toward the stars. Yamato had only seen them from her window, face pressed to cold iron bars, yearning. Those offerings were meant for the departed, but she had always envied them anyway. Even the dead had more freedom than she did. Now, the dragon's decapitated head stared up at her from the shattered earth, and Yamato finally believed something she'd never dared say aloud. She was going to fly. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not when the sun finally rose over Wano. But someday soon. You've gone quiet. What's that serious look for? Ace's voice tugged her back to the present. She blinked, startled, then turned toward him. You came from the East Blue, didn't you? He nodded slowly, brows raised. Have you ever seen one of the Sky Islands? She asked, breath catching in her throat. A glint entered Ace's eyes. Which one? Her heart kicked like a drum. There's more than one? That sent Ace into full-bodied laughter. It echoed across the stones and into the night. Hell yeah. I haven't made it to one yet. Those bastards are hard to reach, but they're real. Yamato collapsed onto her back with a joyful cry, arms flung wide. The stars glittered above her like fragments of promise. And the island where thunder pours like rain, she whispered, eyes wide. Ace snorted. Don't remind me. Deuce nearly strangled me when we touched down there. Fun place, though. If you like being electrocuted. That set them both laughing, loud, reckless, like wind shaking the leaves from a tree. Tonight had pulled two anchors from Yamato's soul. First, the statue. Then, the fear that Odin's tales had been nothing more than fantasy. But Ace confirmed them. Every wild page. Every impossible dream. Those places were real, and they were waiting. Waiting for her. She smiled faintly, memory flickering like a candle's glow. That night, grilling Ace on every name and note in Odin's journal. Soaking in tales of storms and skies and impossible islands. And Ace bragging endlessly about the brother he worshipped. Now, Yamato stood alone again, but the silence didn't ache anymore. Now, are you okay? Hey, you're quite tall for a girl? Shut up, Ulti. Leave me alone. Yamato mumbled in her sleep before turning around. Last night, her father had another annoying feast, and she was left exhausted. She wanted nothing more than to sleep. What? Girl, wake up. This is not a place to sleep. Now, someone was shaking her shoulder, and Yamato snapped her eyes open, ready to use her kanabo at whoever woke her up. Only when she opened her eyes, she realized she wasn't in her room. Instead, she had no idea where she was. Girl, are you okay? You seem confused, the voice said again as Yamato slowly rose to her feet and looked around in complete confusion. She was certain she had never been in this town before, so how the hell did she get here? The town seemed normal, with people walking around. Her eyes looked down at her hands, but the handcuffs were gone. How? She wondered as she looked around, only now realizing she was standing on a strange crater. She looked down at her feet and only now realized the one who had woken her up had been a kind old man. Are you feeling better? He asked, sounding genuinely concerned for her, which caught Yamato a little off guard. Add that to the list of things that catch her off guard in this place. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened and closed her eyes, thinking it was all a dream. This is not working, she thought after trying 10 times before coming up with a brilliant idea. She looked down at her left hand and opened her mouth. She bit her hand. Hard. Ah. It hurts, she screamed in pain as she swung her hand around, trying to get rid of the pain. Why did you do that for? The old man shouted in worry as he tried to check her hand, but Yamato ignored him as she realized something. This was no dream. Which sea is this? Yamato wondered aloud, but it seemed the old man had heard her. Oh, you are in paradise, tall lady. Some say you have been sleeping here for 10 whole hours. Thofu. So they waited until I returned from the office to check on you. The old man answered casually, and Yamato's jaw hit the ground. What? The creaking of the Going Merry punctuated the silence inside the captain's room. Waves outside lashed against the ship's hull. The room was lit, the small lantern swaying with the ship's gentle motion. On the bed lay Luffy, his chest marred by a deep, bloody gash. It stretched diagonally from his left shoulder down to his right hip, staining the sheets beneath him. Chopper worked frantically, his small hooves trembling as he held a blood-soaked cloth to Luffy's wound. "Stay with me, Luffy," he pleaded, his eyes wide with fear. "You're not allowed to die, you hear me?" Luffy's eyes were half-lidded, his usual bright smile replaced by an agonizing grimace. The fight with Aokiji had pushed him beyond his limits, and now, this wound was really starting to annoy him. Every time he took a breath, a gurgle of blood would leak out, and he felt like he was getting slashed all over again. First Akainu, now Aokiji. All missing is Kizaru coming here to say, "Hi," and I will have a wound from all three of them. Luffy tried to joke when a jolt of pain from his shoulder almost made him jump if it wasn't for Nami's golden wings keeping him on the bed and stopping him from moving much. "Don't speak, you moron, now stand still and let us help you," Nezuko shouted at him as she used her powers to make the water from a nearby vase float in the air and swirl around her fingers. She quickly made it touch his wounds, and Luffy clenched his teeth in pain as Nezuko made the water turn warm before touching his wound, knowing it would help him. "Chopper, what more can we do?" Nami barked with concern. This felt like the fight after Akainu all over again. "I need to stop the bleeding first," Chopper stammered, biting down hard on his lip. "Nami, I need more bandages." "Nezuko, keep cleaning the wound with warm water." He glanced at the pool of blood soaking into the sheets, his mind racing. Nami nodded, rushing to Chopper's side with the bandages she had managed to find. She knelt down, trying to keep her hands steady despite the fear bubbling up inside her. "Here, take them." "Thanks," Chopper replied, grabbing the bandages and beginning to wrap them tightly around Luffy's torso. The captain groaned in pain, his fingers clutching at the sheets as his body involuntarily tensed. Nezuko looked at the blood under Chopper's compress. She knew she needed to clean that blood, but she could do it another way. She narrowed her gaze, and the blood slowly started moving away before dripping down on the floor. She worked quickly but carefully, her brows furrowing as she glanced at Luffy's face. "Hang in there, Luffy," she muttered under her breath. "You're tougher than this." Luffy's eyes flickered open for a moment, and a weak smile crossed his lips. "You are all fine. That's all that matters," he managed to rasp, his voice strained and weak. "Don't talk," Chopper scolded, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Luffy, try not to breath as much, and save your energy." Luffy's eyes closed again, his head rolling back onto the pillow. His breathing was ragged. Each exhale was a reminder of the sheer effort it took to stay conscious. Chopper worked tirelessly. He checked the wound, pressing down with the bandages to stem the bleeding, but the blood kept seeping through. Nami watched, feeling a helpless knot form in her stomach. "What else can we do, Chopper?" she asked. She wished she could help, but her devil fruit wasn't exactly made to heal people. All she could do with it was burn, destroy, and become powerful. Chopper swallowed hard, his gaze darting over the supplies scattered around them. "I need to close the wound," he said, his voice steadier now that he had a plan. "Nami, hold his shoulders down. Nezuko, you'll need to keep cleaning the area while I stitch him up." Nami's eyes widened. "You're going to stitch him? While he's still conscious?" "It's either that or he bleeds out," Chopper replied, the grimness in his voice startling the two women. "We don't have time for anything else." Nami nodded, taking her place at Luffy's side. She gently placed her hands on his shoulders, leaning over to whisper in his ear. "Luffy, we're going to fix you up, okay? Just hold on a little longer." Luffy grunted in response, a flicker of his usual bravado surfacing despite the pain. "Why yeah. Just make sure to have some meat for me when I wake up. I'm starving." Chopper took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto the gash. His hooves were steady now. "I'm the doctor of this crew," he reminded himself. "I have to save him." With a deft motion, he threaded a needle and dipped it into a vial of alcohol, disinfecting it. "This is going to hurt," he warned, more to himself than to Luffy. Then, with one last glance at Nami and Nezuko, he began. Luffy's body jolted as the needle pierced his skin. His teeth clenched, and a strangled sound escaped his throat, but he didn't move. Nami used her wings to hold his shoulders down. Nezuko looked at the blood leaking out with uncertainty. There was one thing she could do to keep the blood inside, But could she really do that? What if she caused even more damage? She had learned how fragile the human body can be from her time as a doctor when her island was still suffering from Arlong. If she tried to push the blood back inside too hard and not allow it to leak out, it could cause his veins to spill open like eggs, and Luffy would be dead. She could accidentally injure his organs. Nijiko was about to move her finger toward the blood to force it to stay inside the body, but the injury ran along his entire chest to his right shoulder. There was too much blood, too much wound, and she could accidentally control the blood of his heart. She quickly moved her finger away. Stop it. This is too dangerous. Just let Chopper do his job, Nijiko thought, knowing she would need to talk with Chopper later about this. Chopper worked quickly. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Outside the captain's room, the rest of the crew waited anxiously on the main deck. Zoro stood with his arms crossed, glaring at the floor. Sanji paced back and forth, a cigarette burning between his fingers. Usopp sat against the mast, cleaning his revolvers while Robin leaned against the railing, her face an unreadable mask, and Vivi was covering her face with her hands, because of her emotions. Parts of her body often turned into sands, swirling around the air before returning back to her body. How's he doing? Sanji finally asked, glancing toward the door for what felt like the 100th time. We'll know when Chopper comes out, Zoro replied, his voice tight. Until then, we just wait. Inside the room, Chopper continued his work. Each stitch felt like a small victory. He could feel his own heart pounding in his chest. Come on. Just a few more. He made another stitch, then another, his hands covered in Luffy's blood. Finally, after what felt like hours, Chopper tied off the last stitch. He sat back on his haunches, panting heavily as he wiped his brow. It's done. He murmured, exhaustion washing over him. But he's lost a lot of blood. Now, we just need to keep him stable. Nijiko set down the bloodied towel, her hands trembling. Is there anything else he needs? She asked, looking to Chopper for guidance. Now, we bandage him up and let him rest, Chopper replied, his voice steadier now. He needs to drink water, a lot of water. Nami, bring me the blankets. Nijiko, keep an eye on his pulse and breathing. Nami moved quickly, grabbing a stack of blankets from the corner of the room. She draped them over Luffy, tucking him in snugly to keep him warm. Nijiko took her place beside the bed, her fingers pressing gently against Luffy's neck to check his pulse. His heartbeat is faint, she reported, her eyes fixed on the captain's pale face. But it's there. Chopper nodded, feeling relieved. That's good. It means he's still fighting. He looked at Nami and Nijiko, his eyes filled with exhaustion. We did what we could. Now, it's up to him. The room fell silent, the only sounds the distant MD Luffy's labored breathing. Chopper slumped back, finally allowing himself a moment to breathe. He glanced at Luffy. Come on, Luffy, he muttered softly. You survived that red angry dude, you can easily get over this one. Nami nodded, her wings sinking back into her back. Her skin turned back to normal, and her eyes turned bright orange instead of bright golden. She bit her lower lip. A part of her wished one of her abilities was to help Luffy. Here's the proofread version of the text. Nijiko, on the other hand, had her hand hovering above his pulsating heart. She felt a little strange, experiencing something she had never felt before. She could sense the blood inside his veins, coursing through the many vessels in his body. It felt like warm water running along her palm, and she couldn't understand how this was even possible. She had never felt anything like this before, but she could hear his heartbeat. It was beating too fast, far from normal. So, she moved her hand over his closed wound. In this area, she could feel the most blood moving, and something else as well. What was it? She wondered, her palm still hovering above his flesh. A strange heat emanated from the wound. Narrowing her gaze, Nijiko moved her hand along the length of the wound. The heat wasn't coming from the entire wound, only from the part closest to his heart. She moved her hand again, this time hovering over his heart. The heat was back, but now it seemed to have shifted to a different spot. Nijiko couldn't understand what it was, but she had a gut feeling that it was something bad, very bad. She glanced around the room furtively. Chopper was nearly asleep, his attention solely on Luffy. Nami was preoccupied, her eyes fixed on the log pose. Nijiko looked back at Luffy's chest. She took a deep breath and focused on the heat. She could still feel the blood, but the strange heat was moving toward his spine. Narrowing her eyes, she concentrated on the sensation. Slowly, she moved her finger, willing the blood to stop. Suddenly, she realized her mistake and quickly released it. The blood and the heat resumed their movement. Taking another deep breath, Nijiko focused on the heat once more. "Nijiko, what are you doing?" Nami asked as Nijiko focused on the heat again. She had an idea of what it could be, but she needed Chopper's help. "Chopper, check him again. I think he's not fully healed yet," Nijiko shouted to the doctor. He quickly sprang to his feet and rushed to Luffy, placing his hand on the captain's forehead. "He's too warm," Chopper exclaimed with growing concern. He began checking Luffy's wound and tongue. "Why is this happening? I gave him the medicine. He should be getting better," Chopper added, his voice filled with dread. It could be poison." The words escaped Nijiko's mouth before she could stop them, causing both Nami and Chopper to freeze in place. Chopper seemed deep in thought for a moment before quickly running to his medical bag. He pulled out a syringe as Nami and Nijiko watched. Taking a sample of Luffy's blood, he analyzed it closely. "You're right, he must be poisoned," Chopper announced, alarmed, not understanding how he could have missed it initially. He should have noticed that his captain was poisoned. "Chopper, what should we do?" Nami shouted in fear, her face as pale as milk as she desperately tried to think of a way to remove the poison. Before Chopper could come up with a solution, someone else spoke up. "I can pull it out." "Just shut up," Nijiko snapped, causing both Nami and Chopper to fall silent. She focused back on the heat she had felt and realized it was moving faster toward the spine. Nijiko had no idea what kind of poison was coursing through Luffy's veins, but she knew she had to act fast. She focused intently on the source of the strange heat that she could feel spreading through his body. The warmth of his blood was almost overwhelming, making it hard to separate what was normal from what was deadly. Her fingers twitched as if to grasp the blood, but she stopped herself. Not the blood, she reminded herself, the heat. Sweat rolled down her forehead as she concentrated, feeling the heat inching dangerously close to Luffy's spine. Nijiko shut out every other sensation, honing in on that malicious warmth. Slowly, the blood around it faded from her awareness, leaving only the heat. She clenched her fingers, and the heat immediately halted as if obeying her command. Careful now. She moved her hands methodically across Luffy's torso, guiding the heat along. At one point, she almost lost control as it veered toward his lungs, but she quickly adjusted, focusing all her energy on keeping it contained. Her hands moved upward, guiding the heat toward Luffy's neck, then to his mouth. She was trembling, her muscles aching from the effort, but she couldn't stop now. She had to finish this. Luffy gasped suddenly, his chest heaving as he coughed violently. A thick, purple liquid spurted from his throat, splattering into the air. Nijiko gritted her teeth and directed it with a flick of her fingers, pulling the liquid into a controlled stream. Nijiko guided the swirling poison into Chopper's empty flask. Once it was safely inside, Chopper sprang forward, quickly sealing the flask and placing it on the table. His eyes then darted back to Luffy. He checked the captain's breathing, heartbeat, tongue, and temperature. He's much better now, Chopper said, his voice trembling with disbelief. He turned to face Nami and Nijiko, their eyes glistening with tears. "He's going to be fine," he shouted, louder this time. "Yatta!" Nami shrieked, leaping into the air, her joy echoing off the cabin walls. Nijiko, on the other hand, slumped back into her seat, exhaustion crashing over her like a tidal wave. She felt as if she had just run a marathon, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. Chopper picked up the flask containing the purple liquid, studying it with narrowed eyes. "I'm going to my room to analyze this poison," he announced, determination lacing his voice. As he turned to leave, he cast a glance at Nijiko, who was breathing heavily and leaning against the couch. Despite her exhaustion, a bright smile lit up her face. "You did a good job, Nijiko," Chopper said earnestly, his eyes reflecting deep respect. "I think you could become a doctor, just like Dr. Kureha." Nijiko blinked at him in surprise, feeling a swell of pride at the compliment. Before she could reply, Chopper nodded and left the room, the flask clutched tightly in his hand. Outside, the crew waited, each one silently hoping for the best. The fight with Aokiji had taken its toll on their captain. Robin watched the sea, her eyes distant. He heard an admiral, she murmured to herself, still unable to fully grasp the feat. She always knew that Luffy was powerful, especially after his fight with the Kainu of all people. She knew he was strong, but being able to fight and cause severe damage to an admiral was a feat that had shaken her. After the fight had ended and the ice had melted away, they all ran to Luffy's location, only to see Luffy lying on the ground on his back, bleeding from a wound, while Aokiji was nowhere to be found. Luffy had managed to order them to leave the island, informing them that he had somehow made one of Aokiji's lungs burst before falling unconscious. Suddenly, the door opened, and Chopper stepped outside, carrying the doctor's bag in his hand. From his face and expression, Robin could tell right away that their captain was safe and no longer in danger. "How is he?" Zoro asked, his voice a low rumble. Chopper glanced back at the door. "Luffy is no longer in danger. He will live, but he needs a few days to rest, and that's all." The crew all let out a long sigh of relief, especially Vivi, who had felt hopeless and useless the entire time while waiting for Luffy to get better. Sanji exhaled a long plume of smoke. "I knew he'd make it," he said with quiet conviction. "Luffy's tougher than anyone." Zoro nodded, his jaw set. "Good, while we wait for him to get better. I will decide." Unji, who had been leaning against the mast, shot Zoro a sidelong glance, a smirk spreading across his face. He took a drag from his cigarette and exhaled slowly before responding. "Yeah, right," he chuckled, flicking ash to the side. "You decide our next location." "Sure, as long as you're not navigating us into the closest whirlpool or getting lost in a straight line. Maybe we should invest in a Zoro-proof map while we're at it." He paused, putting a hand to his chin theatrically, "Or better yet, I'll just let you lead us right back to where we started." Zoro's eye twitched, and he shot Sanji an irritated glare. Crossing his arms over his chest, he let out an annoyed huff. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pervert," he grumbled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I forgot the ship's direction is best decided by a glorified cook who thinks his sense of smell can replace a compass. Maybe you can sniff out the Grand Line's best shortcut for us while you're at it?" Zoro leaned against the railing, smirking despite his annoyance. "Or is that fancy nose of yours only good for tracking down empty-headed women?" "Okay, enough with this, you two. There's no need to fight," Usopp said with an uneasy smile as he tried to separate the two while Zoro and Sanji seemed ready to tear each other apart. "Okay, enough of this." Everyone looked up to see Nami, who had walked out of the captain's room. "We need to keep sailing. I will be the one to handle this, and not you, Zoro. I don't think we need to end up on a different planet," Nami shouted, and Zoro grumbled under his breath, while Sanji's eyes turned into hearts. "Yes, Nami," Sanji shouted, quickly doing what she ordered them to do. Vivi morphed beside Nami, looking at her worried. "How is Luffy?" "He's fine, Vivi. Trust me, he survived a Kainu. This is nothing but a scratch to him." Nami reassured her and Vivi felt better after hearing that, but still she looked down at her hands, and Nami noticed that she still appeared quite sad. "Is there something wrong?" Nami asked, concerned. "No. Yes," Vivi answered reluctantly. "I'm still not strong enough to do anything. If I had been stronger, I could have—" "Vivi." Nami interrupted her, placing her hand on her shoulder, making the Alabasta princess look up at her. "Luffy ordered all of us to go back to the ship, not just you, but all of us. This was a fight that Luffy wanted to do by himself, and you know Luffy, when his heart is set on something then he will never budge. So you don't have to worry. You will get stronger. Luffy might be injured now, but once he gets better, we will return to training as we do every day. You will get stronger. All of us will," Nami said reassuringly before hugging the princess, who smiled in delight, hugging her back. Nami pulled away and watched as Vivi entered the room to look after Luffy. While she was gone, Nami looked down at Nico Robin, who was using her devil fruit to help with the ship's sails. Nami always felt that Robin was hiding something from them, and the words the Aokiji guide told them still rang in her ears. She didn't know what Robin was hiding from them, and usually, she wouldn't care to ask. After all, they all had their own secrets, but if those secrets would endanger the crew, Nami knew she would need to ask Robin more about this. Perhaps they could learn more and be more prepared to fight an admiral the next time it happens. Nico Robin stepped inside, her movements silent, trying to not be noticed. Her eyes focused on the figure sitting up in bed. Luffy was awake. Robin's eyes swept over the room. Nami was lying beside Luffy, fast asleep. The blankets covered her up to her shoulders, but the soft rise and fall of her chest made it clear she was in a deep sleep. Luffy, however, was wide awake, his gaze fixed on Robin as she entered. "Luffy," Robin greeted quietly. She could sense something was different, something that made the air feel heavier than usual. "You should be resting." "I can't sleep," Luffy replied bluntly, his eyes not leaving hers. His voice was calm, lacking its usual carefree tone. "I've been waiting for you," Luffy added, the entire left side of his chest covered by bandages. Robin raised an eyebrow, feeling a knot of unease forming in her stomach. She had never seen Luffy so serious. "Why did you want to see me?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. She had an inkling of what this might be about. Luffy was silent for a moment, his eyes drifting to the window where the moonlight spilled across the wooden floor. "Aokiji said something during our fight," he began slowly, his voice low. "He said you would be the downfall of our crew. He said that stronger, more powerful people would be after us." Robin stiffened but kept her expression neutral. She had known this was coming, yet hearing it out loud made her heart skip a beat. "Why would he say that?" Luffy continued, his gaze snapping back to her. "I want to know what he meant, Robin. Why would you be our downfall? And why do they keep calling you dangerous?" Robin hesitated, her mind racing as she tried to think of how to answer. She had kept her past well hidden. She had kept it for so long that sometimes she even wondered if her past was real. Sometimes she liked to pretend that she was someone else, that Nico Robin wasn't her, but the knowledge of poneglyphs and how to read them reminded her of that day. And so did the dreams, the tree burning, her people being blown to bits. Even now, part of her wanted to push it all away, to keep that wall firmly in place. "It's complicated," she said finally. "There are things you don't know about me. Things that I would rather not talk about." Luffy shook his head, his expression growing even more intense. "No," he replied firmly. "I don't care how complicated it is. I need to know if my crew is in danger. I need to know if you are in danger. So, tell me, Robin." Robin sighed softly, glancing away for a moment. The room felt too small, the air too thick. She could hear Nami's gentle breathing beside Luffy. She knew this conversation couldn't be avoided. "Luffy," she began, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "My past is something I have been running away from for a long time. The world government has labeled me a threat because of what I know and because of what I've done to survive." She paused, searching his face for a sign of understanding, but his eyes only urged her to continue. "I was 8 years old when I became wanted," she continued. "I learned things they didn't want anyone to know. Since then, I've been on the run, a criminal in their eyes. Everywhere I go, I bring danger with me. That's why Aokiji said what he did. He believes I will bring that danger to you and the crew." Luffy's gaze softened, but only slightly. He remembered his grandpa telling him that the world government doesn't take kindly to people who know the truth, as he called it. Luffy didn't know what that truth was, and he didn't care much. All he cared for was getting to One Piece, and he knew the poneglyphs had a role in that road. That's why he had asked Robin to tell him what the poneglyph beneath the castle in Elapsda was saying. He wanted to know if it could help him get to the One Piece. He cared not about super weapons. Still, as he looked at Robin, he wanted to know more about what she knew. "What do you know that's so dangerous?" Robin pressed her lips together, her arms tightening around her waist as if trying to shield herself. "There are ancient secrets," she said finally. "Things hidden by the world government. The poneglyphs like the one beneath the Alabasta castle. They hold the truth of the world. The government sees that knowledge as a threat, and because of that, they've hunted me for my entire life." Luffy frowned, his brow furrowing in thought. "So, they're afraid of what you know," he summarized slowly. "But why does that make you dangerous to us?" "Because," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to keep it steady, "everyone who gets close to me ends up hurt. The people I care about. They suffer becauselly with me, whether I want to or not." Silence fell between them, heavy and thick. Luffy's gaze didn't waver, and for a moment, Robin feared what he might say next. She had heard it all before: accusations, condemnations, warnings to stay away. But then, Luffy spoke, and his words surprised her. I don't care, he said simply, his eyes fierce. I don't care what you've done or what you know. You're part of my crew, and that means we take on your trouble together. Robin's eyes widened. But, Luffy, this isn't just some fight we can punch our way out of. The government, the Marines. They're too powerful for us. They will never stop coming after me, and now, they'll come after you, too. Luffy nodded, his expression not changing. Then let them come, he said, his voice resolute. I told you before. I'm the one who decides who gets to stay on this ship. Not the government, not the Marines. Me. He paused, letting his words sink in. And I want you here, Robin. Robin felt a lump rise in her throat, emotions swirling inside her. For so long, she had expected betrayal and rejection to be seen as nothing but a burden. Yet her captain didn't seem to care about all that. He wanted her with them. You don't understand, she whispered, more to herself than to him. If I stay, I could. Then stay, Luffy interrupted. You're not leaving. Not unless you want to. And if you think you'll bring us down, then we'll just fight harder. And don't worry, the world government is after me as well. So whatever you leave or not, it wouldn't make much of a difference. Why is the world government after you? Robin asked with a tilt of her head. My father is Monkey D. Dragon. My grandfather always said he likes looking east or something. I'm really not sure, but he appears to be a big deal. Luffy said casually, and Robin was left with her mouth wide open in shock. Dragon is your father. Robin stopped herself from shouting, reminding herself that Nami was still sleeping. You mean the leader of the Revolutionary Army? Yes, Luffy said airily, not really caring that much about it. He barely knew his father, if at all. The man was almost like a stranger to him, and Luffy was okay with that. His father could do whatever he wanted with his life, after all. Robin realized that Luffy didn't seem to care much about his father for some reason. She could not understand why, and she had questions that needed answers. But looking at Luffy now, she was sure that Luffy might not have the answers after all, so she decided to go back to what the two were talking about at first. All right, she murmured. But, promise me you'll be careful. All of you. Luffy nodded, a faint smile finally breaking through his serious face. I promise, he said. But you have to promise me something too. Robin raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Promise me you'll trust us, Luffy replied. No more hiding stuff, okay? We're a crew. A hint of a smile tugged at Robin's lips, and she nodded slowly. All right, Captain, she said softly, I promise. For the first time in a long while, Nico Robin felt a glimmer of hope and found herself walking towards his bed. Robin sat near Luffy, who was resting against the wooden bed's backboard. She gazed at him with a soft look of gratitude. Slowly, she leaned forward, her fingertips brushing against his cheek. Robin's eyes softened further as she cupped his cheek, leaning closer. Without a word, she pressed her lips to his, a tender yet passionate kiss that made Luffy's heart race. His arms instinctively wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Robin let out a small gasp as he shifted, guiding her onto his lap, her knees on either side of him. Her body pressed against his, and Luffy could feel the warmth of her large chest against his. They continued to kiss. Robin's fingers slid into his messy hair while Luffy's hands held her firmly. Luffy's hands moved to the hem of Robin's jacket, his fingers fumbling slightly as he tried to help her out of it. Robin gave him an encouraging smile. Leaning back just enough to make it easier, with a swift motion, he slid the jacket down her shoulders, revealing more of her smooth skin. As the jacket fell away, Luffy's eyes feasted at the sight of her large breasts, barely contained by a red bra. The fabric strained to hold them in place. They paused, and Luffy leaned in to kiss her again. His hands moved to her back, tracing the clasp of the bra with an eager touch. 3 days later, the warm, delicious smell of Sanji's cooking filled the air inside the Going Merry kitchen. The Straw Hat crew had gathered around the large wooden table, plates, and bowls piled high with food of every kind: meat, vegetables, fruits, steaming bowls of rice, and freshly baked bread. Sanji moved around the room, serving everyone, but of course, serving the ladies first. Ladies first, Sanji chimed as he placed the most lavish dishes in front of Nami, Robin, Vivi, and Nijiko. Only the best food for you. He bowed dramatically and spun back to the stove with a flourish as the women exchanged amused glances. Thank you, Sanji, Nami and Vivi chimed, giving him warm smiles. Nijiko grinned, unable to hide her amusement. You're spoiling us, you know. Sanji's eyes turned into hearts, his cheeks flushed with delight. Anything for you, my sweethearts. It's the least I can do for such radiant goddesses. Zoro, sitting across from the ladies with his arms crossed, raised an eyebrow. Hey, what about us? He gestured to his half-empty plate. How about more meat over here, cook? Sanji's mood shifted instantly. His expression soured, and his eyes narrowed into slits as he shot a venomous glare at Zoro. Huh? You want more food? You moss-headed freeloader? He slammed a small bowl of plain rice in front of Zoro. Here, enjoy your bland meal. Mister, I can't even cook an egg. Zoro's brow twitched in irritation. Oi, I need meat, not rabbit food. Then go hunt a wild boar in the middle of the ocean, swordsman, Sanji retorted. My cooking is meant for the ladies, not for muscle-brained swordsmen who can't tell the difference between seasoning and seawater. Nami and Vivi exchanged glances, stifling their laughter, while Nijiko shook her head in amusement. Meanwhile, Luffy was at his usual antics. Plates around him emptied as he stuffed food into his mouth with both hands, his cheeks bulging comically. Every few moments, his hands darted across the table like a hawk swooping for prey, snagging food off Usopp and Chopper's plates. Luffy! Usopp cried out in horror as his drumstick was whisked away. Stop stealing my food. Luffy glanced at Usopp, his cheeks puffed out like chipmunks. But Usopp, you weren't eating it fast enough. He mumbled through a mouthful, his voice garbled. Usopp scowled. That's because I was savoring it. Yeah, Chopper added, clutching his own plate protectively. You already have enough food on your plate. Luffy's eyes widened as he swallowed. There's no such thing as enough. He reached over to Zoro's plate, snatching a piece of meat right as Zoro was about to stab it with his fork. Oi! You idiot captain, Zoro barked, his eye twitching in anger. Hands off my food. Luffy simply grinned, unfazed. Sanji is right there. Just tell him to bring more food, he said with an innocent grin, shoving the meat into his mouth with a triumphant smile. Robin chuckled softly, sipping her tea. It seems Luffy has made a rule not to take food from the ladies, she noted with a slight smile. Nami smirked, placing her fork down. Well, at least he has some sense of manners. She glanced at her untouched plate of food. Though I'm surprised he hasn't made a move on my plate yet. Hee, don't worry, Nami, I would never take food from you, he promised, grinning with crumbs still around his mouth. Good choice, Nami replied coolly, her wings growing for a moment with golden blades. Because you know exactly what would happen if you did. Luffy gulped, nodding fervently. He quickly shifted his attention back to the nearest available target, look in Luffy's eyes, and immediately went on the defensive. Oh no, you don't? He squawked, lifting his plate high in the air. This is mine. You already took my drumstick. Luffy's arm easily snatched another morsel before Usopp could react. Thanks, Usopp. He shouted joyously as he brought the food back toward his mouth. Usopp's jaw dropped. That's my steak, he howled, slumping back in defeat. Chopper decided to shield his plate. You're not getting mine, he declared bravely, positioning himself defensively in front of his food. Sanji glanced over, ready to intervene. Oi, Luffy, he snapped, waving his spatula menacingly. If you're going to act like a food-stealing monster, then at least learn to cook. I'm not making extra just because you can't control your appetite. Luffy paused mid-bite. But that's your job, Sanji. You're the best cook ever, he said cheerfully, clearly attempting to butter up the chef. Sanji sighed, torn between his pride and Luffy's backhanded compliment. Damn you, he grumbled, though the corners of his mouth twitched upward. Fine, I'll make one more serving. But if I catch you stealing from the ladies, you're going on a seaweed diet. The room erupted into laughter as Luffy gave a thumbs up, oblivious to the consequences. Deal. Meanwhile, Vivi and Nijiko exchanged amused glances as they ate. This crew really is something else, Vivi remarked, shaking her head. It's like watching children squabble. Nijiko nodded with a grin. True, but it's really entertaining. She took a bite of her meal and shot a grateful look at Sanji. The food really is amazing, Sanji. Thank you. Sanji turned to them, his previous irritation melting away in an instant. His eyes morphed back into hearts as he clasped his hands together, swooning. "Anything for you, my lovely ladies," he cooed, practically floating over to their side of the table. "If there's anything else you need, just say the word." Zoro, finally managing to get a piece of meat after fending off Luffy's attempts, grumbled around a mouthful of food. "Can't believe you treat the ladies like royalty and the rest of us like garbage." Sanji spun around, eyes ablaze. "That's because you are garbage, mosshead," he snapped, jabbing a finger in the swordsman's direction. "A brute like you doesn't even deserve to look at my cooking, let alone eat it." Yeah, Zoro muttered, rolling his eyes but hiding a small smirk behind his cup of sake. "As long as I get to eat, you can call me whatever you want, idiot cook." Sanji's eyes narrowed, his temper flaring. "What did you just call me?" Luffy, sensing the brewing storm, stuffed another piece of meat into his mouth and mumbled, "More food, less fighting, guys." His voice was muffled by the sheer amount of food he was chewing. And just like that, the kitchen descended into its usual chaos. Sanji and Zoro exchanged insults, Nami and Robin watched with amused smiles, and Luffy continued his one-man mission to eat as much food as possible. After they had finished eating, Chopper walked out of the room and returned with the flask containing the poison that had almost killed Luffy. "Oi, Chopper, why did you bring this?" Usopp asked, pointing at the flask that Chopper placed on the dinner table. "I figured out what kind of poison it was, and strangely, it wasn't a poison meant to kill," Chopper revealed, and the crew looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean? Are you saying this poison isn't actually poison?" Nijiko asked, pointing at the flask. Everyone grew even more confused when Chopper shook his head. "It is poison, but not one that kills. It's called the Sweet Kiss of Ice, and can only be found in the land of Icewing, the coldest place in the world," Chopper explained, and Nijiko's eyes widened. "I thought that place didn't exist." "Well, Dr. Kureha said she visited it 60 years ago, but she mentioned that the island is never in the same place. One year it's in the North Blue, and another year it could be in the South Blue. It always moves. That's why you can't find it on any map, and many believe it's just a legend," Chopper continued, while Nami's eyes lit up with a wide smile. She repeated the words, "It's not on any map." The thought of being the first to chart the island's location excited her, and she was determined to understand why it was never in the same place. "Back to the poison," Chopper said, bringing the crew's attention back to the flask. "This poison doesn't kill, but it can cause the spine to freeze, making the person unable to move anything below the neck. It's almost impossible to cure. Even Dr. Kureha had told me that this is one of the illnesses she can't heal," he finished grimly. Luffy's smile faded. He clenched his fists, a dark determination simmering in his eyes. He would make that admiral pay the next time they met. 2 days later, the sun was setting over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the main deck of the Going Merry. The crew had gathered outside, some leaning against the ship's railing, others sprawled out on the deck. Nami nodded, rubbing her temples as she leaned back against the railing. "We were lucky to get out of there in one piece." "I still think what you did was careless," she said, glancing at Luffy, who was sitting cross-legged with a grin on his face. Luffy scratched his head and laughed. "I just kept punching until it worked," he said cheerfully, completely disregarding the near-death experience they just had. Many had noticed that Luffy had returned to his cheerful self, laughing and grinning as if nothing had happened. He cracked jokes, stuffed his face with food, and goofed around with Usopp and Chopper like always. However, the crew wasn't fooled. They could see it in his eyes. Something dark there. It was clear something was bothering him, but despite his usual openness, he kept this turmoil locked away. Yesterday, Chopper had removed the bandages from Luffy's chest, revealing the scar left behind. A jagged line ran diagonally across his chest, starting from his left shoulder and ending near his stomach. It was thick and slightly raised. Along the edges, smaller branch-like scars spread outward like the roots of a tree, twisting over the flesh. "Yeah, and nearly got yourself turned into an ice sculpture," Sanji chimed in, lighting a cigarette. "I've gotta say, though, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here to talk about it." Usopp sighed, his eyes wide with fear. "But Aokiji was a freak. I mean, he froze the whole ocean. How do you even fight someone like that?" With sheer stupidity and luck, apparently, Zoro grumbled, shooting Luffy a sideways glance. Nijiko, who was standing next to Nami, nodded in agreement. Still, it's probably best we avoid any more encounters like that for now. First Akainu, now Aokiji. I don't think we need another one. Yeah, I get it, Luffy said, waving his hand dismissively. We just need to get stronger. Next time, I'll beat him without getting so banged up. As they talked, Usopp had been gazing out at the sea, lost in thought. Suddenly, something strange caught his eye. His mouth dropped open, and he blinked rapidly, rubbing his eyes. Guys. He stammered, pointing ahead of them. Am I seeing things, or is that a giant frog swimming in the water? Everyone turned to look. Sure enough, in the water ahead of them, a massive frog was swimming freestyle, its powerful legs kicking up large waves. Sanji's eyes lit up at the sight. A giant frog, you say? He mused, a sly grin forming on his face. I can already imagine the delicious frog legs I could whip up for dinner. Fresh seafood is overrated. It's time we added some amphibian to the menu. Luffy's eyes sparkled with excitement at the thought of food. Giant frog legs? He exclaimed, already drooling. Sanji, that sounds amazing. Let's catch it. Luffy leapt to his feet, pointing ahead with fire in his eyes. Alright, let's go after the big frog, he declared. Wait, hold on, Nami interjected, waving her arms frantically. We don't even know where it's going or yourselves into. Who cares? Luffy grinned, already scrambling up the mast to get a better view. It's a giant frog, and we're gonna chase it. Great, now we're chasing after oversized amphibians, Zoro grumbled, rolling his eyes. What else is new? Hey, at least it's not another marine warship, Usopp muttered, still staring at the frog in awe. That thing is huge. How does a frog even get that big? I don't know, but if it's big, it probably tastes good, Sanji added, twirling his spatula. Luffy, let's catch our dinner. As the ship adjusted its course to pursue the frog, the crew could hear the sound of water splashing loudly as the creature swam furiously ahead. Then, something strange happened. They all started hearing a deep, resonant sound. What is that sound? Nijiko asked, a puzzled look on her face as the hum grew louder. Robin's eyes narrowed. It's getting closer. Luffy kept quiet, wondering if any of them would be able to notice it. Usopp's observation haki quickly picked up on what it was as it got closer, and he turned to look towards the sound. Wait, is that a train? Good job, Usopp. Nami's eyes widened in disbelief as she looked to the horizon. A train? On the water? Zoro's jaw dropped as he turned to see it as well. That's not possible. Luffy's eyes went wide with amazement. It's a train on the water, he yelled excitedly, hopping up and down on the mast. This is awesome, we need to get closer. Closer? Nami shrieked, grabbing the railing as the roaring sound grew even louder. Luffy, are you crazy? That thing is coming right at us. Sanji's cigarette nearly fell out of his mouth as he gaped at the sight. Holy crap, it's moving fast. The train was barreling towards them, riding on what seemed to be tracks laid on the water's surface. The front of the locomotive was sleek and silver, with a large cowcatcher-like bumper that glinted in the light. It charged ahead, emitting a deafening rumble that sent ripples through the sea. Luffy! Usopp screamed, his voice cracking with panic. That thing's gonna run us over. Luffy, however, was now entirely focused, a glint of excitement in his eyes. No way! We're gonna ride that thing. What do you mean, ride? Zoro snapped, gripping his swords. You can't just. Everyone, hold on, Nami shouted as she spun the ship's wheel, trying to veer off course. We need to avoid that train or we're gonna be smashed. Nijiko, now, Luffy ordered. Without hesitation, Nijiko raised her arms, some a massive wave that surged up in front of their ship. The wave pushed the Going Merry backward, the sudden force sending a spray of seawater across the deck. Just in time, the water train thundered past the spot where they had been moments before. Good job, Nijiko, Luffy said, a grin spreading across his face. He squinted into the distance, spotting a lighthouse as the train passed by, still gliding across the water's surface. All right, let's catch up with it, he shouted. The Going Merry glided to a slow stop in front of the lighthouse, the crew squinting to get a better look at the structure. It was a tall, weathered tower of stone, Its once bright paint now faded and chipped by years of exposure to the elements. As the Mary came to a complete halt, the crew spotted a figure standing near the lighthouse, waving at them. A moment later, a voice called out. "Well, now, you folks sure know how to make an entrance." The voice belonged to an older woman with a tanned face, large eyes, and an easygoing grin. She wore a simple, weathered jacket and had wild, bushy hair. At her feet stood a small girl in a blue dress with a white sailor hat, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Beside the girl hopped a rabbit-like creature with oversized ears. "Ahoy there!" Luffy shouted back, leaping to the bow of the ship. "Who are you?" The older woman chuckled, putting her hands on her hips. "Name's Kokura. This here's my granddaughter, Chimney, and her pet rabbit, Gonbi," she said, gesturing to the girl and the rabbit, who both gave cheerful waves. "We work at the station here." Usopp leaned over the railing, eyes fixed on Kokura. Hey, about that train," he blurted out. "How does a train travel through water? I mean, isn't that supposed to be, like, impossible?" Kokura grinned. "Well, lad, it ain't magic if that's what you're thinking," she said, walking over to the edge of the dock. "The train runs on railroads that are built under the sea. They laid tracks along the ocean floor so the train can travel between islands. It's a marvel of engineering, it is." Usopp's eyes widened as he absorbed the information, his mind racing. "Railroads? Under the sea?" he repeated, his voice tinged with awe. "That's incredible. So it's like a regular train, but it rides the currents along underwater tracks? Who made it? Could I build one myself?" Kokura chuckled, clearly entertained by Usopp's enthusiasm. Ho, you'd have to ask the people at Water 7 about that. They're the ones who built it," she explained, a nostalgic look crossing her face. "The folks there have the best shipwrights and engineers in the world. If you're looking to build a water train, or anything else for that matter, they're the ones to see." "Water 7? Vivi repeated, her brow furrowing in thought. "I've heard about that place. It's famous for its shipbuilding, isn't it?" Kokura nodded. "That's right. It's where you'll find the best ship factories and craftsmen in all the seas. You're lucky, really. That train you just dodged is heading straight to Water 7. A glint of excitement sparked in Luffy's eyes. He hopped off the ship, landing on the dock with a thud, and marched up to Kokura. "Then that's where we're going," he declared. "We're gonna get a new ship." The moment those words were heard, Usopp's face darkened, and for the first time, he glared at Luffy. "We're gonna get a new ship." The tension hung heavy in the air as Usopp's glare bore into Luffy. The usually cheerful sniper's face was contorted with an anger none of the crew had seen before. Nami stepped forward. "Usopp, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Usopp's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Why don't you ask our captain? He seems eager to throw away our home like it's yesterday's garbage." Luffy turned slowly, his straw hat casting a shadow over his eyes. "That's not what this is about." "No? Then what is it about, Luffy?" Usopp's voice rose. "Are we just going to sell Mary like she's some piece of trash? After everything she's been through with us?" The rest of the crew watched in stunned silence. Zoro's hand instinctively moved to his swords, while Sanji's cigarette hung forgotten between his lips. Chopper shifted nervously, looking between his two friends. "Kaya gave us this ship," Usopp continued, his voice cracking. "She trusted us with Mary." "I know." Luffy's voice was soft but firm. "Mary has been our home for the past year. She's carried us through storms, through battles, through everything. I couldn't have asked for a better ship." "But not good enough to remain, apparently," Usopp spat, cutting Luffy off. Robin watched the exchange with careful eyes, while Vivi's sand swirled anxiously around her feet. Nejiko placed a steadying hand on her sister's shoulder. "Listen to me, Usopp." Luffy's voice carried the weight of his position as captain. "If I had a choice, I would never abandon Mary. Never. But I don't have that choice anymore." "There's always a choice." "No, not this time." Luffy stepped forward, his eyes meeting Usopp's. "Look around you. Really look. The cracks in her hull. The patches we keep making. The way she groans even in calm waters. Mary is breaking down more each day. We can fix her. We always have. Until when?" Luffy's voice rose slightly. "Until she splits in half in the middle of the new world? Until we're all at the bottom of the ocean because we were too stubborn to accept reality?" Sanji flicked his cigarette over the railing. He's right, Usopp. The Grand Line is one thing, but the New World, that's different waters entirely. Nobody asked you, Sanji, Usopp snapped. Oi, watch your tone, Zoro growled. We're all feeling this, but you don't see the rest of us losing our heads. Nami stepped between them. Everyone, please, this isn't helping. Mary is our home, Luffy continued, his voice softening. She'll always be our first real home as a crew. But she can't sail the waters ahead. If we try to force her, we won't just lose our ship, we'll lose our lives. So that's it? Usopp's shoulders trembled. We just replace her? We honor her, Robin spoke up, surprising everyone, by acknowledging her limits and ensuring her sacrifice isn't in vain. Vivi nodded, her sand settling. She's right, Usopp. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is know when to let go. Easy for you to say, Usopp muttered. You weren't there when we got her. You didn't see Kaya's face when she gave us this ship. You don't understand what Mary means. That's enough. Luffy's voice cracked like thunder. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to leave Mary behind? She's carried us through hell and back. She's as much a straw hat as any of us. Tears began streaming down Usopp's face. Then why? Because I'm the captain, Luffy replied, his own eyes glistening. And it's my job to keep this crew alive. Even if it means making decisions that break my heart. Chopper sniffled, wiping his eyes. I've been trying my best to patch her up, Usopp. But it's like treating a patient with a terminal illness. You can ease the pain, but you can't stop the inevitable. Nijiko stepped forward, her voice gentle. The ship I grew up on, the one that carried me and Nami through our childhood. We had to let it go too. It wasn't easy, but sometimes that's what growing means. But Kaya. Usopp's voice broke. Would want you to live, Nami finished softly. She gave us Mary to carry us on our adventures, not to die with her. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. The waves lapped against Mary's hull, her familiar creaks seeming more pronounced than ever. Kaya gave us this ship, Usopp continued, his voice thick with emotion. She trusted us with Mary. She believed in us, in me. I know, Luffy said softly. Mary has been. No, Usopp cut him off, turning away. I don't want to hear it, not right now. He walked toward the cabin door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Mary deserves a second chance. She deserves better than this. His shoulders slumped. She's not just a ship, she's family. Without waiting for a response, Usopp disappeared into his room, the door closing with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than if he'd slammed it. Nami moved to follow him, but Zoro caught her arm. Let him be. Luffy stood motionless, his straw hat shadowing his eyes. The decision weighed heavily on him, but he knew it was the right one. Still, seeing his friend's pain cut deep. He'll come around, Sanji said, finally lighting a fresh cigarette. He just needs time. Will he? Chopper asked quietly, his big eyes worried. Robin placed a gentle hand on the reindeer's hat. Some wounds need time to heal, doctor. Vivi's sand swirled anxiously around her feet. Should we talk to him? No, Luffy said firmly. Not tonight. He understood Usopp's feelings all too well. The Going Merry was more than just their ship. She was their first real home together. But as captain, he couldn't let sentiment override the safety of his crew. Nijiko exchanged glances with her sister. This isn't going to be easy, is it? Nothing worth doing ever is, Nami replied softly. The crew gradually dispersed, each lost in their own thoughts. The sound of Mary's creaking seemed to echo Usopp's words, a reminder of what they stood to lose. Inside his room, Usopp sat on his bunk, head in his hands. I won't give up on you, Mary, he whispered. I can't. On deck, Luffy remained at the railing, watching the stars reflect off the waves. He could have argued, could have pulled rank as captain. But some battles weren't meant to be fought with words or fists. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a leader was knowing when to let someone grieve in their own way. The morning sun painted the horizon in brilliant golds and pinks as the Going Merry approached Water 7. At first, it appeared as merely a dark smudge against the skyline, but as they drew closer, the city began to take shape in a way that left the crew speechless. Well, almost speechless. Holy shit! Nami exclaimed, leaning forward over the railing. Is that water flowing upward? Indeed, massive waterfalls seemed to defy gravity, cascading upward in great arcing fountains that connected different levels of the city. The entire metropolis was built in tiers, like a massive wedding cake made of stone and water, with the upper levels shrouded in a perpetual mist from the spray. "It's like a giant fountain," Chopper squealed, stars in his eyes as he bounced excitedly on the railing, held secure by Robin's extra hands. Sanji took a long drag from his cigarette, watching the water's impossible flow. "Oi, Nami Swan, are you sure your navigation isn't broken? Because I'm pretty sure water isn't supposed to go that way." "It's the city's water system," Robin explained, a rare smile playing on her lips. "The fountains are powered by the legendary Aqua Laguna's residual energy." "That looks awesome," Luffy shouted, perched precariously on Mary's figurehead. His eyes were wide with wonder as he watched ships of all sizes navigate the water roads that wound through the city like liquid streets. As they drew closer, the true scale of Water 7 became apparent. The city rose from the sea like a maritime colossus, its architecture a stunning blend of classical and fantastic. Buildings sprouted from the water like stone flowers, connected by arching bridges and canals. The lower levels boast all boats zipping through the waterways like water striders on a pond. "Look at those masks." Vivi pointed to the people riding what appeared to be aquatic horses through the canals. "They're so unique." "Those are Yagara bulls," Robin informed them. Water 7's primary mode of transportation. Zoro, who had been napping, cracked open his eye. "Huh. A city where the roads are made of water. No wonder I keep getting lost on land." "You'd get lost in a straight line," Marimo, Sanji quipped, dodging the half-hearted sword swipe that followed. "The architecture is incredible," Nijiko marveled, watching as water cascaded down massive stone facades. "Look at how the buildings seem to grow right out of the ocean." The city's crown jewel came into view as they rounded the final approach, the Galila headquarters, rising above everything else like a palace of stone and spray. Its spires reached toward the sky, water flowing down its sides in carefully controlled streams that caught the sunlight and created countless rainbows. "Those must be the shipyards." Chopper pointed to the massive dry docks that lined the lower levels. They could see ships in various stages of construction and repair, with workers swarming over them like ants. "They're huge." Luffy's eyes sparked like diamonds. Hey, do you think they have meat shops here too?" "Is that really what you're thinking about right now?" Nami sighed, but couldn't help smiling at her captain's predictability. "The water here, it feels different, more alive somehow." "That's because it is," Robin explained. Water 7's entire ecosystem is built around its unique water system. The city literally breathes through its canals. As they approached the main harbor, they could see people using water-powered lifts to move between levels, the mechanisms working with precisely engineered grace. Street vendors' calls echoed across the water, mixing with the sound of construction and the constant rush of the fountains. "It's like something out of a fairy tale," Chopper whispered in awe. "More like something out of a shipwright's dream," Sanji corrected, watching a massive galleon being lowered into one of the dry docks using an elaborate pulley system. From the crow's nest, Nami called down, "We'll need to head for the main intake channel. There's a harbor master's station just past that big archway." The archway in question was a massive stone structure that seemed to be crying endless tears of water, creating a curtain of spray that rainbow lit their path into the city proper. "Wonder if they have a good bar," Zoro mused, finally fully awake and watching the city with interest. "Wonder if they have beautiful ladies," Sanji sighed dreamily. "Wonder if they have a cotton candy store," Chopper added hopefully. As they passed under the Great Arch, the full breadth of Water 7 opened before them like a pop-up book coming to life. The morning sun caught the spray from countless fountains, creating a perpetual rainbow that crowned the city. The air was filled with the smell of salt and stone, and the sound of water falling up and down created a symphony unique to this impossible place. "Everyone," Nami called from her position at the helm, "welcome to Water 7, the city of water." "Awesome," Luffy shouted again, his voice echoing across the water and drawing amused looks from passing locals. The Going Merry creaked beneath them as they made their way toward the harbor, almost as if she too was in awe of this magnificent city. For a moment, even Usopp emerged from his room, unable to resist the spectacle before them, though his expression remained guarded as he watched the shipyards draw closer. As they prepared to dock, Luffy's excited chatter about exploring mixed with Nami's practical directions about where to secure the mooring lines, while Sanji already planned which markets to visit for supplies. The Going Merry glided smoothly toward the docking area. As they approached, Luffy stood from his favorite spot on Merry's head, his demeanor shifting subtly. It was a change the crew had come to recognize, their usually carefree captain stepping into his role as leader. "Nami," he called out, his voice carrying that rare note of authority. "Before anything else, we need to exchange the gold for money. But not all of it." Nami paused in her preparations for docking, raising an eyebrow. "Not all of it? Luffy, that gold is worth a fortune. Why would we keep any?" "Because I need some," he replied simply, adjusting his straw hat. Robin, who had been helping secure the mooring lines with her multiple hands, looked up with interest. "Oh, what sort of project requires gold, Captain?" Luffy grinned mysteriously. "It's a secret, but it's important." Knowing him, he probably wants to make a golden meat statue, Sanji muttered, lighting a fresh cigarette. She. Nope, but that's a good idea too. As the ship came to rest against the dock, Nami began organizing their departure. "Alright, how much gold do you want to keep?" "Just 2 bars, Luffy decided. "The rest we can exchange." 2 whole bars? Nami looked pained. "Do you have any idea how much money that is?" "Nami," Luffy said, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. 2 bars. She sighed dramatically. "Fine, but this better be worth it." As the crew prepared to disembark, Zoro started to get up from his napping spot. "Oh no you don't," Nami pointed at him. "You're staying right here." "What? Why?" "Because," Sanji smirked, "you'd probably end up in East Blue if we let you wander around Water 7. "I would not," Zoro protested. "You got lost going to the bathroom yesterday," Chopper pointed out innocently. "The ship was rocking. We were anchored," Robin added with a small smile. Zoro crossed his arms and sat back down. "Whatever. Someone needs to guard the ship anyway." Luffy clapped his hands together, gathering everyone's attention. "Okay, here's what we're gonna do." He pulled out several bundles of money they already had on hand. "Nijiko, Chopper, Robin. You 3 go find medicine. Get everything we need, and Chopper, get yourself some medical books if you want." Chopper's eyes lit up. Really, Sanji, take Vivi and get food supplies. Get the good stuff. We can afford it now." "Of course, shitty captain. Come on, Vivi Schwan," Sanji twirled toward the princess. "What about me?" Usopp asked quietly, speaking for the first time that morning. Luffy's expression softened slightly. "You're coming with me and Nami. We need to exchange the gold, and then..." He paused briefly. "We need to talk to the shipwrights about Merry and a new ship." Usopp flinched visibly but nodded, his eyes downcast. As Luffy handed out money to each group, he added extra to each share. "Get something nice for yourselves too." "Are you sure about this much?" Nijiko asked, counting her share. "Yep. Robin might want books, Chopper definitely wants books, and you might see something cool." "What about me?" Vivi asked. "You're with Sanji, so you can help pick good food, and maybe find something pretty." Oi, Sanji interjected. "Are you saying Vivi-chan isn't already pretty enough?" "That's not what I meant and you know it," Luffy stuck out his tongue. As the groups prepared to split up, Nami started giving directions. "The exchange office should be near the main square. Robin, the medical district is supposed to be on the 2nd level, near the northeast fountains. Sanji, I saw some markets near the harbor as we came in." "What about me?" Zoro called out. "You just stay put and don't get lost on a stationary ship," everyone shouted back in unison. "That happened one time. Try 17, Nami corrected. As they walked down the gangplank, Chopper was already chattering excitedly about what kinds of books he might find. "Do you think they'll have books about aquatic medicines? Or maybe some Water 7 special techniques?" "I'm sure we'll find something interesting, Doctor," Robin smiled. "Ooh, maybe they'll have books about desert medicine us don't spend all day reading," Nijiko teased. "We need to actually buy supplies too." Sanji was already making a mental inventory. "We'll need fresh vegetables, meat for the bottomless pit we call a captain, spices." "Vivi-chan, is there anything special you'd like me to prepare?" "Anything you make is wonderful, Sanji-kun," she replied, causing him to twirl with hearts in his eyes. As the group split off in different directions, Luffy, Nami, and Usopp headed toward the exchange office. The atmosphere between them was tense, with Usopp trailing slightly behind. The exchange rate here should be good, Nami was saying, more to fill the silence than anything else. Water 7 does a lot of international trade. Hey, Usopp, Luffy called back without turning around. After we're done at the exchange, want to explore the tool shops? Might find some cool stuff for your inventions. Maybe, Usopp replied non-committally. Meanwhile, at the medical district, Chopper was bouncing from shop to shop, his eyes wide with wonder. Look at these herbs. I've never seen anything like them. They're probably local varieties, Robin observed, examining a particularly interesting specimen. Water 7's unique environment must produce some fascinating botanical specimens. Oh, look at this. Chopper held up a thick book. It's about aquatic medicinal plants. Nijiko laughed, watching the little doctor's excitement. I think we found where all your extra money is going. In the market district, Sanji was in his element, expertly examining produce and haggling with vendors. Vivi-chan, what do you think of these tomatoes? They look fresh, she replied, leaning forward to smell them, and they smell wonderful. The soil here is rich in minerals from the sea, the vendor explained proudly, makes everything grow better. We'll take 2 kilos, Sanji decided. And what about those herbs over there? Up in the medical district, Chopper had amassed a small mountain of books and supplies. Are you sure this isn't too much? Captain was quite generous with the funds, Robin reminded him, and these will all be useful. Look at this salve, Nijiko held up a jar. It's supposed to be good for treating rope burns. We could definitely use that. In the market, Sanji's cart was quickly filling up. We'll need extra meat for Luffy. These spices look good. And these fruits. Vivi-chan, would you like me to make you a special fruit parfait later? That sounds wonderful. Vivi smiled, then pointed to a stall. Oh, look at those candies, Chopper would love those. Good thinking. We'll get some for everyone. Meanwhile, Zoro had actually managed to fall asleep on the deck, despite, or perhaps because of, being told to stay put. Back in the medical district, Chopper was finishing up their shopping. I think we have everything we need now. And quite a bit more, Nijiko teased, looking at their loaded bags. Knowledge is never wasted, Robin smiled, carrying several books of her own. In the market, Sanji and Vivi were heading back, their arms full of supplies. This should last us a while, Sanji said satisfied. And I found some new recipes to try. I can't wait to taste them. Vivi smiled. And look what I found, she held up a beautiful blue scarf. Nami will love this. Back on the Mary, Zoro opened one eye as a messenger bird landed on the railing with a newspaper. He got up to retrieve it, glancing at the headlines as he sat back down. He muttered. Looks like things are getting interesting in Water 7. Luffy suddenly stopped walking, his sandals scraping against the stone pavement. His eyes narrowed slightly, head tilting as if listening to something only he could hear. The playful demeanor that had occasionally surfaced during their walk vanished completely. Nami noticed the change immediately, recognizing that particular look. Luffy, what is it? Someone's here, he said quietly, his voice carrying that rare serious tone that always meant trouble. Someone very strong. Usopp glanced around nervously. How strong are we talking about? Luffy didn't answer immediately, still focused on whatever his haki was telling him. The bustling sounds of Water 7 continued around them, but there was a new tension in the air. Strong enough, Luffy finally said, a slight grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Strong enough to make things interesting. That's not reassuring at all, Nami hissed, her hand forming a fireball, ready to fight if someone decided to attack them out of nowhere. Should we be worried? Nah, Luffy replied, adjusting his straw hat. Not yet, anyway. He started walking again, but his stride had changed, more purposeful, more alert. Just keep your eyes open. Water 7 might be more fun than I thought.